I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first thing is to approve the agenda. Anyone have any questions, issues, changes to the existing agenda?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion by Sean Ryan, seconded by Dave Brusick to approve the agenda as presented. If there's no other comments, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, passes 5-0. First thing on the agenda is our truth and taxation hearing, public hearing. We're going to start with Mike's going to kind of do his little presentation, and then we'll open it up for any public comment after that.
Let me first get a gauge of those in the audience that are here for the truth and taxation public hearing or information about the budget and property taxes. Anybody? Okay, we got a few. Everybody else is here for the public hearings on the street project. Okay. All right, that just gives me a gauge that normally the mayor and council give me about 45 to 50 minutes to do this presentation. I'm joking when I say that.
You know he's not.
We want the pay version.
You know, we spend all kinds of time trying to get ready for this meeting, and the information that we collect and that we have available is the biggest thing that we do out of my office every year, and they say you've got 3 to 5 minutes to present. It's really disheartening that we try to put together a lot of information. It'll be on the website after tonight. Can everybody hear me in the back all right? Well enough? Pardon?
A little louder.
Little louder, that's,
There you go.
how's that, a little bit better? If I told you one thing, and trying to keep it to a little bit of a minimum tonight, is whatever information you received on your preliminary property tax statements for our truth and taxation public hearing is no longer valid. The council has taken actions to reduce it. And let me tell you what they did, is we had to adopt the preliminary levy back in September, and that was adopted at a little over $4.3 million, or up about $251,000, or 6.1%. Based on final action that they took this last Monday, a week ago today, they have reduced that preliminary tax levy down to $4.18 million, or down $156,000. They cut almost 62% out of that preliminary levy, so that the final levy as of tonight that we're introducing is, like I said, $4.18 million, about $95,000 compared to what we started at way back in September. We're required to do that because when we set that preliminary levy, the council can only reduce that, and that time period comes after September. And so they're involved in budget work in September, October, November to get to tonight's public hearing. And once they set that levy, it can only be reduced, it cannot be increased. So the good news for you tonight, with whatever your statement was, is that it will be impacted by them cutting almost 2/3 of what that preliminary levy was out of the budget, subject to public comment tonight and their final adoption on December 17th. So that, in a nutshell, is the gist of the news. All of the other data and information that I have that I can go through is ancillary and supportive of all of that. I'm going to try to hit a few of the highlights, maybe some of the pictures. Ken, which one do I hit?
Top one.
The red one. I'm going to click through more. There's more data and information here, and that if you had all night, like I said, I can probably talk for 45 to 50 minutes. But in light of the fact that we've got 2 public hearings at 6:30, I'll try to go through a little bit faster. Some of the other noteworthy news at the beginning of the budget here, this is just a sheet that's a YouTube video that you can go take a look at about city services and property taxes and what the corollary is. But some of the notable features, besides what I already just told you, is that our tax base for 2019 is up about $600,000 or 9%. And this is the 6th consecutive year that we've seen growth in that tax capacity whereas the 4 years prior to that, we saw a decline over that time period. Our LGA for this coming year is flat at a little over $850,000. And the one other good news associated with the council's action on reducing the property tax levy is we're going to see our property tax rate likely to decrease from about 61.2% down to about 57.5%, a rate that we've not seen since about 2009 or 10 years ago. So those are just a few of the couple of notable. I'm not going to go through all of them, or like I said, they've never let me get through all of this. The accomplishments we have in here is we've had a phenomenal year, I think, as far as the activity that we've had go on here. And I've got pictures that maybe I'll walk through here instead of going through the list. First one is our electric department has been up to a lot of good work this year, specifically receiving a American Public Power Association award recognized for providing reliable public power as an RP3 designated provider. So that's great news. And along with that, before I go on, is that this year they acquired new electric service territory from MVEC that has resulted in an increase in the number of customers we have by nearly 20%. That adds about 850 new customers. And it included, I think they left out, we installed nearly 55,000 feet of new underground distribution lines. How many miles is that, Bruce? A little over a mile? No, 10 miles, yeah, I'm taking feet, sorry. Category. So that's a rather large growth activity that hasn't been seen and will benefit this community for many, many years to come. And they finished this last week, all of the installation of the meter change-out, and so that was a huge undertaking. Last 4 years, we've spent working on the renovations of the Memorial Park baseball facility. We participated in the Minnesota Amateur Class B and C baseball tournament this summer. Over 3 weekends, we had 29 games. I think everybody would agree that has had any part in the project or attended the facility is we have a very modern, significant, up-to-date facility that hasn't been seen in many years. So nice improvement there. The Fitness and Aquatics Center is now into the beginning of its second year under the joint powers agreement between the city and the school. So things are continuing to grow and expand in swimming lessons and activities and swim club and school education for junior high kids. So that facility is getting used more and more. And then as of the 1st of November and working with the Mayo hospital system is that between the city and the school, we've enhanced that opportunity and now have added a fitness component to it. So hopefully you're able to get out and utilize it, that now you get both basically for the price of one. Building activity continued here in 2018 at a slightly slower pace. Last year, 27, I think we got spoiled. We had 173 new residential units last year. Second busiest year on record going back to 2003. And so we returned to a level and a pace that we may hit 25 by the end of the year, but a little bit different than what it was last year. I don't know if any of you are planning to become a resident of this facility. Hopefully someday. I know I'm looking forward to it. But what was completed and constructed this year was the Prague Village over on the east end of town. This 91-unit affordable senior housing project is the largest multifamily housing project not only in the city but in all of LeSueur County. So it's a nice project to have, and hopefully will provide housing for years to come. I know residents are going to be able to move in and start taking up residence, I believe, sometime in January. Downtown Highway Project, part of which is why we're here tonight, has been ongoing now, 2+ years. I think we're into this, have most of next year to go, and then construction in 2020, so you'll hear more about this when we come tonight. I won't spend a lot of time in this other than the 2019 project next year, which will include County Road 37, significant work on redoing that entire stretch in the city limits between Highway 21 and Highway 19. Council's decision here 2 weeks ago to likely add 2 new roundabouts to that will be an interesting project, along with a number of the things that I've got on the list there. Here we'll just keep going on. The total budget for this next year is about $4.8 million. That's up about $124,000, or I believe about 2.6% for 2019. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. This is our LGA picture, flat for next year. No significant change from the state of Minnesota. Expenditures are at the same $4.8 million. The budget is balanced. It's tonight's hearing. Capital outlay list, the special projects that we've got scheduled. Again, due to the amount of time, I'm not going to go into all of those, but are able to answer. This is just a historical 10-year perspective of how the budget has changed. A little bit of a graph. We had some unique things in 2017 dealing with the financing of the swimming pool and transfers from other funds into the general fund and out of there to pay for those improvements for the school, which is kind of the operation for 17. Otherwise, I think we've been at a little over a 2%, 2.5% growth over the last 10 years. You can see we generally ended up fairly positive with revenues over expenditures in most years. Debt service, the last 8 years, we've averaged right at or just under about $1 million in the debt service from a taxation standpoint, so no significant changes for the coming year. This is just the official notice that we have to put, coupled with the other revenues, either from funds on hand, from utility funds, from golf course funding, anything that goes into that debt payment gets added with what the tax levy piece of it is to pay off our annual expenditures there. The new Prague PDE budget, which is right at about $50,000, supported with an annualized tax levy of $50,000, has been that way for the last 9 years, as I recall. So no change in the EDA budget. Just some general information on understanding property taxes and how it affects you and how things are calculated. We always throw that in the formula here as far as how your property taxes are actually determined. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that tonight, but we put some of that in just from an educational perspective. Here's the piece on our tax capacity this last year for 2019. We're up about 9% for the year, and we've had 6 successive years of growth, which is a good indication that the community growth and tax base is on the upswing. Here is the one key piece as to why some of you are probably here, and what it does is it reflects my opening statement that our total tax levy for the year is proposed at $4.183 million, up about $95,000 or 2.3%, and that's down from the original levy that would have been up about $251,000 or about 6.1%. So the council made a lot of policy choices at our budget workshop last Monday and has reduced that levy. This is kind of showing what the levy has been for the last 10 years at a little over an average 2% annualized rate over the 10 years. I've been here, I can speak to the 10 years because I've been here all of those 10 years. So that's kind of what the historical picture has looked like. We have a breakdown as far as a number of the elements that are changing in the general fund that are causing that $95,000 impact, from personnel costs to the fitness and aquatic center operations fee, to some new changes in the PD to cover the 2 drug task forces that we participate, as well as some new equipment in their budget, some new computer technology maintenance support and hardware improvements. The technology world is ever changing, and we're finding that it's going to take some money to stay current, as well as some reductions in that budget, one of which the council made a decision on that's part of this that helped reduce the levy to the level it is tonight, and that is the elimination of the city's outdoor swimming pool. There was a little over $31,000 in the general fund budget that they cut out that is no longer in, and so we'll wait here to see whether there's any comments. Included in our general fund is an annual transfer to the golf course to cover principal and interest payments on equipment. No change in the debt service fund, no change in the EDA levy for a total levy increase. That's not correct. It should be right at about $95,000 or 2.1%. I think we got the wrong slide in there. This is the piece that really helps me try to show people when they ask, where do our tax dollars go and what does it amount to? And in a simplistic way, this is for every dollar of city taxes that you pay, where is that amount distributed? 75 cents in that dollar goes to the general fund. And when I say general fund, it covers all of those departments up there that are general government, from admin to technology to elections, the assessor, attorney, planning, government buildings, to public safety, which is police, fire, EMS, animal control, to public works, engineering, street department, street lighting, to culture and recreation, which is the aquatic fitness, municipal band, the parks, the park board, the library. Unallocated, which is just kind of miscellaneous, that doesn't specifically, isn't attributable to any department at a penny. $2 in the transfer to the golf course for 75 cents or 3/4 of the dollar. 24 cents on the dollar goes to pay debt service, the principal and interest on outstanding city bonds, and then 1 penny to economic development. So there in a nutshell is where your tax dollar goes as to where you perceive or receive levels of service. This is graphically how things have changed over the last 10 to 11 years with a levy. And as I showed you in an earlier slide, it's a little over 2% annually is how it's changed. This is a piece that is kind of unique with the action that the council took. Kind of tough to see a little bit, but this is an attempt to show, when you take a look at your taxes, what part of your total tax bill goes to the city, the school district, the county, the miscellaneous districts. That if you look at it on the far left-hand side, that's the city of New Prague. That would be this column right here. I happened to arrive in New Prague back in July of 2008. The 2008 budget was set. My first budget working with the council was 2009. And you can see the levy at that time was 52.67. With what we're providing as part of tonight's proposed recommendation, we will see that levy be at about 57.5 for this next year. So we've not seen that level. We've worked very hard over the years to do frugally and cost effectively what needs to be done. As you saw, the growth in that number over the years, part of that's attributable to the decline in our tax base. And now as the tax base has come back for the last 6 years, we've been able to reduce that tax rate. Thus, the proposed 2019 is we're at 57.5. I don't know exactly what the school and the county and the special districts are at this point. The other part of it is that when you go back to 2008, 2009, we were at right about 45% of the tax piece that are the taxes you pay. 45% come to the city. This current year that we're in is we're right at 45%, and it could go a little bit lower. So we've been up a little bit to a high of almost 48.7 or almost 49, and we're going to drop back down to right at just under 45. And you can see the city there, the blue line, and how we've changed over that time frame where I talked about the growth in the tax base and the decline in the tax base and what that's allowed us to do with our corresponding tax rate. The last piece is how can I answer what is that financial impact? Well, the challenge is where everybody has a different market value. All I can tell you is that if we take a look at an average market value house in New Prague at around $200,000, and there was no change in value from 2018 to 2019. That household would see about a $68 increase for 2019. So it really varies on what happens and how somebody's valuation is changing. There's too many different scenarios and pieces that go into the tax calculation, that other than giving you the estimate of impact on an average market value house, that's kind of the best that I can do for tonight's public hearing. The last pieces we have is several pages that are in the handout that we have, and that'll be on the website tomorrow, is information on how and why property taxes change and what are the pieces that impact that. When you look at, are there any ways for anybody to receive any property tax relief? There's 3 programs that we're aware of: the homestead credit, which most of you probably already have filed for and is in place. There's the renter's property tax refund that requires you to get information from your landlord and to file with your taxes. And then the last one is the senior citizens property tax deferral. That is certain criteria that has to be met in order to be eligible for that. I couldn't stand up here tonight and to provide this information without the great assistance and involvement that I have from all of the staff that you see on the slide. Patty Solheit, our finance director; Ken Ronish, our planning community development director; Glenn, our public works director; Bruce, utilities general manager; Jim, chief of police; Jeremy Tukalski isn't here tonight, our fire chief; Barb, the administrative coordinator; and Leah Stender, our accounting technician. The council didn't make final choices on the budget till last Monday, and quite frankly, it's been a quick, long, tough week trying to get this materials put together in basically less than a week for your presentation tonight. But couldn't have done it without all of those people's help. And so with that, Mayor, I'll stand for any questions. Following any general comments or information tonight, the City Council will formally consider the adoption of the 2019 budget and the property tax levy adoption at the December 17th meeting, and that'll be at 6 p.m. So with that, Mayor, I'm trying to go as quick as I could.
That's pretty good for you, Mike. Okay, any questions or any issues from anyone on the council before I open it up to public comment?
I have a quick question to Jim. Were the squad cameras and the body cameras taken out of the budget? Or
No,
I just didn't see them listed.
They are in the contractual part of the PD budget. You won't see that. That would have been the materials you had. This is kind of the summary budget, but they're in the operating portion of this budget.
Okay.
So they are still.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Bruce, are you okay? Okay, well, at this portion, I'm going to open the floor up for any public comment. If you'd be so kind to come to the podium, state your name and address, and either give your comment or a question, and hopefully we can get that answered. Yes, please.
Hi, first of all, I'd like to say that my name is Steve Walker. My wife and I own Humble Pie, the store down at 215 West Main Street. And I would like to say that I'm very impressed with the city of New Prague and how you run your business. All the more so, my surprise hit me yesterday when I found out that my property taxes on our 2 properties, one has gone up 70.7% and the other 23.4%. We have not made any improvements to the properties. In fact, the one that went up 23% is a parking lot. Its value last year was $22,900. This year, $22,900. In spite of that, it's gone up 23%. The building was assessed in 2018 at $121,500. Now it's $189,100. That one's gone up 70.7% in a year. I guess my question is why? The other question is, has this happened to other businesses in New Prague? If it has, I would be very surprised. If it hasn't, I wonder why us?
Mike, do you?
I'll try. The only thing I can tell you is that I know Scott County went through some significant review of property values this last year. When you received the notice of value in the mail with your taxes the first part of the year, did you inquire at Scott County as to the reason for the changes?
Yes.
And?
They didn't have an answer. Other than that, it had been a great time since they had looked at the value of properties in Prague, and they had made a couple of adjustments.
The council doesn't sit and have any control over the value.
I really didn't come here expecting an answer.
Well, I'm trying to help you out as best I can, is to indicate as I look at the change, the first and only thing you can do is typically in the spring when you receive your property taxes for the year, is you also receive a notice in the mail about your change in value. And it's at that point in time that it's important for all property tax payers or owners to inquire of the county about the change in value. I have absolutely no idea as to the rationale or the reasoning behind that change, but because of that, even with a decrease in the tax rate, that's why you're likely seeing probably an increase in your property taxes, is because of that significant value change. And so the first thing I would do, knowing this, is I would attempt to put them in touch with the commercial appraisers in Scott County, albeit it might be too late right now, even looking ahead to what's coming in 2019, because the time to have addressed or appealed that value increase was this last spring.
I think that the point is the council does not set any value. We are not involved in any assessments at all. It's done both in Sewer and Scott County at the county level. And so I guess Mike was just basically emphasizing that any dispute with values has to be handled at the county level.
I guess as an overall question, I would say, are you aware of this happening to anyone else in town? Or have we been kind of chosen for some reason?
I don't know, again, that I know they have instituted a new valuation process, and they have a new name for their software. I can tell you, I live in Scott County, and this last year I saw a fairly significant reduction in my value. I probably should have kept my mouth shut, but I didn't. Only because I didn't think that there was a reason that the value of my property should go down. Come to find out they had made a mistake and they hadn't caught it, and by bringing it to their attention, they brought it back to where it was. So I can't answer. You're the first one that I've heard from personally that has indicated this level of change, either on the building. I don't think you said there was much change on the parking lot, correct?
Only 23%.
Value, that would be because of the change in spending this year.
The property value did not change.
Correct.
Nonetheless, the tax went up 23%.
Mike, is that the,
No, it's up a little bit. It's on all fronts, both city, county, and school. And I understand what he's saying is that the total bottom line tax went from $674 to $832 with no perceived change in market value. And so that only can relate to spending, whereas the other one on the change in the building would be significantly related to the increase in the value on the building. That's all I can answer.
But is ours just 6%?
Well, I'm trying to look at it, and as you take a look at this is preliminary. This is what comes out based on September adopted preliminary levies that can only come down in the process. And so in looking at the city's piece, all I can tell you is that the council reduced the levy from about $251,000 down to $95,000. So that one should change pretty significantly coming the other way.
Your effective tax went from 6 point something percent down to 2 point something percent as a result of reduction, and that's laudatory. But in my case, I'm looking at somewhere between 23.4% on the one property and 70.7% on the other, hence my confusion. Particularly in the case of the parking lot, the market value remains the same,
Correct.
but the tax goes up 23%. So I guess I'm asking a philosophical question that I don't really expect an answer from tonight, but hopefully it might.
Well, I'd love the opportunity to take a look at that in more detail with you, just to try to be able to answer your question definitively as to, in light of the fact that that value didn't change, why the significant change, and does that correlate with what actions that we've taken? And I can only speak to the city side of it, I can't speak to the other governmental entities.
Okay.
So I can answer that one in more detail.
Maybe we'll follow up another time.
I would love to.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
My name is Pat Weldon. I live on Main Street next to Quick Trip. Maybe that affected mine. Mine is 62%, but my value went up also. I figured that was because I painted the house. I don't know. But on next week, I think there's a Scott County meeting also. So.
A truth and taxation meeting? Yeah, again, if it's an issue of the assessed value of your home going up, that would be something directly related with the county. As I stated before, the council is not involved in
Right,
any...
I was just mainly
Right, no,
with him that
if,
he
yeah.
isn't the only one.
Okay, yes,
In fact, my taxes doubled.
okay.
So I figure if they double 2 more times, I'll have to go in assisted living.
I'm sure your wife thinks you're in assisted living already.
That's a different kind of assisted. Anyway,
Okay, appreciate the comment. Anything else? Okay, if not, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
I got a second by Dave Brujek. All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0, so the public hearing closed. As Mike has stated, the council is not going to make any action tonight on the budget. We will do that at our next meeting. So if something comes up between now and then, don't hesitate to contact Mike or myself or anything, and maybe we can get answers before we actually do the final approval of the budget for 2019. So, thank you. Mike, next.
Sure, let me introduce as part of tonight's second item, which I believe is why most people are here. I'm going to introduce Chris Cabot, our city engineer, who many have seen in the past, and will be the leading part of the presentation tonight. With him, the actual project manager from SEH is Nikki Farrington up here in the front row. Nikki and Chris work hand in hand with us. Nikki is the overall project manager for the city on this because it's a joint city MnDOT project. Chris functions on that team, but also functions in the capacity of our city attorney. With us, city engineer, excuse me. That was going to be my next introduction, but to keep the engineers on straight and narrow tonight is we have with us our city attorney, Scott Riggs, in case there's any legal questions that might arise during any of tonight's discussion. Also with us from MnDOT and the originator of the letter that came to the council back in November, I believe it was, early November, which precipitated the call for tonight's public hearing, We have Glenn Kudrin, who is the project manager for MnDOT. So he'll be part of the presentation. And then also with us is Brett Posh. I'm trying to think of Brett's exact title within MnDOT.
District Traffic Engineer.
District Traffic Engineer, okay, there you go. But I should know that after the past 2 years, meeting every other month with he and the rest of the MnDOT team down in Mankato, that we've got to know each other quite well. So it's these 4 individuals that will be help leading tonight's public hearing. And it's really, if you'll endeavor and allow me to do it, I'll attempt to explain unless Chris, you were going to do it. If you want to do it, I'm certainly, I'll hand it over. Why don't I do that since it's his show and he's a city engineer? I'll let him explain the purpose of tonight's dual public hearing. We'll want to run both of these actions in parallel. We'll take comments. Most of the information flows between both of the action items. And at the end, we'll have to close the public hearing after any and all public comment. And then there are separate, different actions expected on both of those items. And I'll let Chris and Nikki direct you through those. Also off our team that's been a great asset in this mix is Glenn Stiek, our Public Works Director. I know he was ready to retire a number of months ago, and we're still keeping him in the game here, trying to keep him on for the project. So we're hoping we don't wear him out too much in this. But with that, let me turn it over to Chris and let him walk you through the 2 hearings that we're holding here tonight, Mayor.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council, and public. We're here for a public hearing for the Trunk Highway 19 Main Street 2020 Improvement Project. I want to remind everybody, if you're here for the meeting, there is an agenda in the back. There's also a sign-up sheet. I'd like ask you to sign in just so we know who is here and to kind of get a count on everybody that's here. The purpose of this meeting is kind of threefold. Number one, it's for council consideration of what we call the project layout, the final layout, or municipal consent. And basically, to see this drawing that's attached to the wall, this is what we refer to as the layout drawing. It's not a final plan, it's more of a guide on the geometry and the number of factors that are to go into the final plans. And it's part of the process under State Statute 161, where MnDOT asks the city to consider this municipal consent on the project. The other portion of this project is basically a repeat of the public improvement project based under Minnesota Statutes 429, which is the process that cities go through for doing city-led improvements where a portion of the cost, a share of the cost is assessed to the benefiting properties. We're actually repeating this public hearing that was held on June 4th because of the size of this project, it won't be under contract within a year since that first public hearing. And so under state statute, we do need to amend the resolution, revise the resolution, hold the public hearing, and basically set a kind of a time frame under which the project would be under contract. And again, that's anticipated to be under contract about a year from now. The third item that'll be for council consideration is basically approval of what we call temporary occupancy, and we'll have a little more information on that. But what it is there's a storm line that goes through Memorial Park. It's an existing storm line that needs to be replaced with this project, upsized, slightly different alignment through the park to keep the area from the memorial, the Veterans Memorial open. And because this is going through public lands and there's federal funding under this project, one of the requirements is basically to assure that there's no adverse effect on the public lands, and that the city's acknowledging that as part of this project. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Nikki to go through a lot of the technical stuff, and then I'll cover it at the end when we get into costs and funding on the project.
City Council members, public. Again, my name is Nikki Carrington. I'm the project manager, and we've been at this a while. So I'm going to go through a little bit of the background of where we started and where we're at now, and kind of what The municipal consent is actually approving as part of this project. So just again, an overview of the project. We are talking about a full reconstruction, basically from Highway 21 all the way to 7th Avenue. There is also a little portion of 19 on the west side of 21, and that will just be a mill and overlay and some curb work, so not the full reconstruction. Public utilities and stuff is purely just the roadway surface that's going to be replaced on that section. The history of this roadway, I think at the very first open house there was a few comments about, didn't we just do this? And really, when you look back, it was the 1990 overlay project that added the curb extensions that are out there now and the brick boulevards and the decorative lighting. If we go even further back, one of the reasons that we're here today is because the utilities that are underground by 2020 will be 100 years old. And so with that, back in January 2013, MnDOT contacted the city to let them know that there were plans to do a mill and overlay of the downtown area. The city came back to MnDOT and said, wait a minute, we again have these 100-year-old utilities, can we do something different? And so there was lots of negotiating, lots of talking, and that's where we came to the joint powers agreement. And so it's actually a city-led project. The city is actually fronting the funding so that it can be built in 2020 instead of waiting until MnDOT funding that wouldn't have been available until mid-20s, 2025. So it's part of this partnership that has allowed the city to be very involved. And so I'm going to show a little bit about some of what's happened up to this point. So again, I'm just going to go back for 1 second. So in 2016 is when the city council ordered the feasibility study. We started working on this project quite quickly after that. So some of the first outreach we had was in June of 2017 and in October 2017. So we had 2 public open houses. The first one we talked about more just issues. We had a blank map and we kind of just listened to the public in terms of what they wanted to see happen on this project. In October 2026, we actually had a version of this layout that's up for approval tonight. We also had a neighborhood meeting. We specifically sent invites out to property owners that are adjacent to the project. Had a meeting in April. And then we've also been out to check out New Prague and Dojinki, both of those 2017 and 2018. Again, just sharing the layout, sharing the plans for the project. We also have a website that we've been updating and includes the information from all the open houses. We've been doing Facebook posts to get people to get to those websites and look at this new materials when it comes out, and especially for some of the public meetings. And one of the final pieces of our outreach has been the stakeholder committee. There's a few of us in the room here today who have probably been to most of these meetings, and when you look at this list, it seems to have gone by very fast. So we started meeting last February, and again, this is a committee of 15 representatives of New Prague, and then a handful, about 5 city staff that make up about 20 members of the stakeholder committee. They've been through the process of looking at alternatives and again have gotten us to this point where we're at today. We asked them a couple months ago if they were supportive of the current layout, and you can see overwhelmingly all of them that were in attendance were in approval of the layout. There was just a few that still had some remaining questions, but overall most were fully on board with the layout as it's being represented tonight. So the scope of this project, like I said, it is a full reconstruction. And so this just gives you a good example. We actually had a board like this out at Dojinki and to check out New Prague, and it definitely got people's attention. One of the first questions was, is this New Prague? Obviously not, but this will be New Prague in 2020. So this is actually St. James, which just went through a very similar reconstruction 2 summers ago. But this just shows you, I mean, we are talking building face to building face, storm sewer, sanitary sewer, water will all be replaced. So there'll be some large holes in the road in 2020. But as part of that, we also were able to come up with a new vision of what that Main Street looks like once we get down and put those utilities in and put in the roadway and sidewalk. So it also will include new lighting, new streetscaping, and I'll give you a little preview if you can survive through this PowerPoint. we've got a visualization that'll actually drive you through a portion of the corridor and kind of see what it might look like here as we get to construction. So I just want to make sure we understood what's being approved today. So the main point, again, is what's on the layout, which simply is just roadway geometric, so it's the lane widths, parking widths, and sidewalk widths. It's 2 traffic control changes. So again, we're showing 2 mini roundabouts as part of this project. It is access changes, that I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. And it's also looking at the right-of-way needs. So how much right-of-way will we have to permanently acquire, and also temporarily need in order to construct the roadway. There are a bunch of other items that are out there that we're working on right now with the stakeholder committee, with the PMT, that aren't part of this municipal consent now. They'll be part of a future approval of the plan once we pull together the construction documents. So that's the landscaping, the streetscaping, the staging of construction, and business outreach that we plan to do in the next year. So one of the first items I want to talk about, again, this is something I've been here before. We talked about this earlier in the year, the roadway geometrics. So there was some back and forth between the city and MnDOT. Again, this was a joint powers. It was both of them giving and taking in terms of what is needed on the roadway. MnDOT did have at one point a width that was quite narrow, but then the city also wants it a little wider, so overall a compromise was made. We're proposing a 44-foot width throughout the corridor. Just to give you a picture of that, this is what the roadway is right now between Lincoln Avenue and 7th. So it'll be the same width as it is through that portion of the corridor, throughout the entire corridor. This just gives you an idea. This is just a visualization in front of the library. So there'll be 12-foot lanes and 10-foot parking. Again, just how it is between Lincoln and 7th right now. Part of the reasons for this narrowing of the roadway is safety. It's been shown that the wider the road, the more comfortable people are going faster. There isn't that constrained feeling. So I always tell people when we're at these public meetings and such, think about how you drive when there's a funeral at the Bruce X funeral home. When there's lots of cars on there, most people, you feel a little more constrained, you kind of slow down, you pay more attention, and that's the feeling that we're trying to get by narrowing up the road a couple feet on both sides. The 2 traffic control changes we're recommending are at First Avenue and at Columbus, so on both sides of St. Wentz Church. The first one is replacing the existing traffic signal that's at First Avenue, and the second one is a new traffic control feature. Obviously, we looked at future volumes of traffic on this road. We looked 20 years out, and one of the recommendations based on that modeling effort of looking at the traffic was that that location would need either a traffic signal or a mini roundabout. So again, as part of this project, we wanted to look to the future, and so that's why we have both those locations having the mini roundabout control. Some of the features, obviously, this is a community who knows roundabouts, so it is a safety feature. They usually have lower crash rates, less severe crashes when there are crashes at them, basically because everyone is slowing down as they approach them, so it's less severe crashes than you would at a signalized intersection even. And again, they allow that traffic movement and people to get where they need to go just as efficiently as a traffic signal did. St. James just finished building their mini roundabout. They have 2 of them in their community as well. From all indications that we've heard from MnDOT, they work very well. They've had, Brett's nodding, I'm pretty sure there's still no severe crashes have happened at either of them.
Correct.
I think one question people often have is how do large trucks navigate them? They are meant to be mountable, so a large truck would actually go through the intersection if they were making a left turn, just as they would in a regular intersection. So the purpose for the mountable curb is that these large trucks can make those maneuvers without having to jump the curb, but they still go over that center circle. So there's some videos out there on our website that kind of show you how those trucks go through those turns. But again, it's so far has been very effective in St. James. One other portion of this project is looking at access changes. So one of the reasons that we look at that is that too many driveways and intersections can cause problems along the roadway. Some of the two main ones have to do with vehicles and pedestrians. So the first one is vehicle crashes. There's research that shows the more access that you have on the road, the higher the crash rate goes up. So it just shows you that the more conflicts that you can have along the roadway, the more opportunity there is for cars to get into crashes. And so that's one reason why we look at, is there ways to reduce those access. The second one is for pedestrians. You can imagine as a person walking on the sidewalk, the more accesses that you have to cross. It's not only the local streets that you have to cross and be in conflicts with the vehicles, but it's also at every access point that you're walking across. You have to be looking for vehicles coming in and out, both coming from the roadway and coming onto the roadway. So we did get from MnDOT. MnDOT District 7 has an access committee. So their members are a variety of backgrounds. So Brett here represents the traffic engineering side of it, but they also have transportation planners, they've got land management folks, they've got roadway designers. So they all, and every project they do, they look at the corridor and look for opportunities, again, to look for these safety improvements that can be done in terms of access changes. So they do this for everything. Depending on the level of the project, depends on the level of scrutiny they give to each access. So when they go through a mill and overlay, they may not do as much because they know they're going to be back in 5 to 10 years to do probably reconstruction. But when they're doing a project like this, where it's a full reconstruction, they're not going to be able to change these access for 30, 40, 50 years. They look with a little more scrutiny at the access points. So when they looked at these changes, they did look at closing some access to 19, and they did look at consolidating multiple accesses into one. Overall, we are now suggesting 11 access closures. Every single one of them either has access to, either they have more than one access, so they'll have one remaining onto 19, so that's at 2 locations. Or they have access to a back alley or a local street. So they have multiple access that gets them onto a local street system instead of onto 19. And there are 2 accesses that are no longer used, so there used to maybe be a garage, but now it's been remodeled and there's not. So those are 2 in residential areas where there was a house removed and then one where a garage was remodeled. The last piece that's part of the municipal consent is the right-of-way needs. So for the whole corridor, almost every single property along the corridor will need temporary easement from. This is because, especially in the downtown core, MnDOT's right-of-way actually ends about 2 or 3 feet from the building face. So if we were to only go and reconstruct within MnDOT's right-of-way, we would be leaving a strip of sidewalk basically against all the building faces, and that's obviously something we don't want to do. And so we'll need temporary easements from all those properties in order to either get to their building face or to get into their alcove and redo the sidewalk so that their alcoves work well into their doorways. When we're looking at the sidewalk, none of the sidewalk will be outside of the MnDOT right-of-way, but in order to make the connections between the landscaping and stuff into the sidewalk, we need, again, construction easement in order to make that happen. There are 3 locations that we're looking at permanent easement or permanent right-of-way takes. Let me see if I can get this to work. This is the Columbus mini roundabout, Columbus Avenue. So this is St. Wen's Church. So this little triangle here is one piece that we need. And the reason we need that is we have to have enough space for the sidewalk. In order for it to be adequate for ADA, which is the American with Disabilities Act, it needs to be at least 6 feet wide, obviously to have 2 people on wheelchairs crossing each other. And in order to get the mini roundabout to fit, we would need a little sliver of land there in order to make that work. We also need a similar thing on this side. It's harder to see, a little bit smaller amount that we need for permanent right-of-way, again, to get that pedestrian access through there. So MnDOT requires that to be on their right-of-way. The last piece of right-of-way is actually railroad right-of-way. So this is Mill Avenue. So this is just on the east, or right by the railroad tracks. It's currently a gravel road. The city's looking at getting enough right-of-way right now. The MnDOT the railroad right-of-way is almost in the middle of that road. So they're looking at just cleaning that up and getting the right-of-way from the railroad so that that's all within city property. And then the last piece of right-of-way that we're looking for is actually permanent landscape easements. This is something that's going to be based on the preferences of the property owners. But as of right now, through the stakeholder committee, we've recommended certain locations for fencing to go. And again, like I just said, MnDOT's right-of-way stops 3 or 4 feet from that property or from the building face. And a lot of these are between buildings. And so in order to get that fencing in, we would need permission from those properties to use some of their space to put that fencing down. So these would be, again, they're not something that are required. It was more just if the property owners are willing to provide this landscape easement in order to get the fencing in. With that, I was going to hand it over to Chris to talk a little bit more about the city work.
I want to talk a little bit about detour and access. A number of people have seen this in the past, but so under this project, obviously with Main Street closed, detour is obviously something that's going to be necessary and required. But also what's critical is access to the businesses, the buildings, and everybody on Main Street. So we have kind of taken a comprehensive look at how are we going to deal with traffic as well as maintaining access to the downtown area. So what we are suggesting and proposing at this time is basically an eastbound and a westbound detour route. So for example, traffic coming from the west eastbound that's detouring town, getting around the area, would actually go to Highway 21, County Road 29, 10th Avenue, and then back out east. Traffic coming from the east going westbound would come into County Road 37, around to Highway 21, and then would continue on west. This is to get the traffic that's coming through town or coming on 19 to get it around town, around the construction. With that, we would also have, and you can see within the blue routes and the yellow routes, that these would be access, areas that are signed for access to businesses, access to locations on Main Street, south side businesses, north side businesses. There would be a fair amount of signage that would direct traffic to get to those locations. So we felt that this, while it's going to be some inconvenience, obviously for folks that maybe live on those detour routes, obviously there's going to be some pain for the businesses on Main Street, where this is kind of everybody feels the pain a little bit here. And again, trying to maintain that access to those areas. The other thing that we will require at a couple locations is the intersection of First Avenue South or Southeast and Columbus Avenue. One of those intersections, we would require in the contract that one of those intersections be open at all times, whether that be a temporary gravel surface, etc., but maintain some type of cross connection for the neighborhood to the north and the neighborhood to the south. We'll also have to have something similar to that over on 3rd Avenue and 2nd Avenue northwest for the mill and the traffic over at the mill. Another thing that'll happen, as Nikki alluded to, is a replacement of all the utilities, but that'll also require the replacement of the sewer and water services that are out in Main Street. It's not really difficult for those in the residential area where the building's set back from the right-of-way, but for those where the downtown buildings are up right next to the right-of-way, it presents some challenges. Sanitary sewer services, which as is illustrated here, will be brought up right up to near the edge of the building and connected to the existing pipe. Water is a totally different story. Water would actually need to be brought into the buildings. Those that have basements, that's going to be the easiest situation. There'll be some challenges with buildings that, for example, don't have basements or maybe crawl spaces. The other thing that we will be contacting property owners about is making sure that everybody is considering whether or not they're going to be in need of fire service. At some point in the future, if they ever want to develop the property or redevelop the property or have it for a higher and better use, multifamily residential, etc., there'll be a need for a larger service that can be utilized for fire service as well. So those will be things that need to be thought about as we get into this further. As Nikki said, this will be what downtown will look like at some point. I want to point out a couple things. We talked about maintaining access. The key will be keeping that existing sidewalk in place as long as possible. As you can see in this example from St. James, there's a barrier there where the sidewalk outside along the buildings is still open. People can come from the side streets around the corner and still get to the local businesses. There will be some times when there'll be some inconveniences. Somebody comes around the corner, comes around this corner and wants to go to this building and finds out that somebody's installing a water service and they'll have to go around and come in from the other side. So there'll be sometimes situations like that. You can see a little blue line here along the edge. This is the temporary water that's actually connected to the water services that feeds the building. Those will be utilized and kept in place until the new water is in and ready to be hooked up to the buildings, etc. Again, maintaining access. Every contractor, contract requirements will be the same, but every contractor will have different tools and methods, etc. So this is an example from Red Wing here on the left. This is Nicollet Mall in Minneapolis. You can see a corridor kept open and actually a bridge across the fresh concrete. Again, we may not see something like that, but you can see there'll be a number of tricks and in order to maintain access to those buildings, etc. I want to talk about project cost. Again, as part of this project, feasibility study was prepared. It was presented to the council back in May and then presented again at the public hearing on June 4th. These numbers at this point have not changed. They'll be refined as the final design gets further along. So these are the costs as outlined in the feasibility study. About $5.8 million is roadway improvements, street and landscape and lighting improvements, about $2.7 million. Stormwater improvements, about $800,000. Sanitary sewer improvements, just under $900,000. Water system improvements, about $1.2 million. Cost for permanent temporary easements, $118,000. And then fiscal bonding and administrative costs, about $637,000. All totaled about just over $12 million. So the funding on this, as presented in the report, as this is a MnDOT trunk highway, MnDOT will have the largest share of this project, $6.5 million, or 54% of that cost of that project. There are two legs on this project, Scott County leg and the LeSueur County leg at First Avenue Southeast and at Columbus. So there is some, based on cost participation policy, Scott County and LeSueur County will have some cost involvement here. The city was successful in obtaining a federal grant, just under $1.8 million, 15% of the cost of this project. And then the sanitary sewer fund, $680,000, and water utility fund just over $900,000. Assessments are proposed to be a portion of the cost of this project. Again, the city has a number of items that are a number of things that they need to contribute to this project, and so that is a factor in this. The assessments will be based on the city's assessment policy, and I'll get into a little more detail on that. And then the final item is the $675,000 estimated for general levy or potentially state aid, which is the state aid, municipal state aid roadway funding that could be utilized on this project as well. Again, bottom line, $12 million. So this is how the estimated contribution breakdown. I like to always show this, the neighborhood contribution, that's the assessments at about $1.5 million. Citywide contribution through all those utility funds, about $2.2 million. And then the outside contributions, federal, state, counties, et cetera, just under $8.4 million for that $12 million bottom line. The city's assessment policy, we did present and propose to do something a little bit different on this project, just because of the nature of the downtown with a lot of the small properties. If you recall projects we've done in the past, We've always treated properties on a unit basis, so single-family residential, and treating them, assessing them as one unit. We are proposing to do that with the residential properties on this project. So there's a flat unit rate for residential properties. Because we have so many non-residential properties that are, some of them are very small, some of them are large, we needed to somehow equate that to the residential. So it was actually, we had proposed to convert the assessment rate to a front footage rate for commercial properties. And that's how it's noted here. So the residential rate was divided by 75, which is the average residential lot, which basically you come up with a front foot rate. Non-residential properties are assessed at 30% higher than the residential rate as well. So that's how that rate is calculated, and I'll show you what that comes to. So for the commercial properties, they'd be assessed on the front footage. For those on corner properties, a number of them were assessed under previous projects and were assessed according to them being on corners. And that would be the same case on this project. For example, if those that are on Main Street, there would be a slight, what they call corner credit, to account for a half a unit credit on those properties, so that they're not paying that full frontage on corners. These are the rates that were similar to what was presented. They have changed in since the feasibility study and in the last public hearing, and frankly, for the street improvements down here at the bottom, we're not anticipating these changing at all up until the assessment hearings. The assessment rates for the water sewer services, these are estimates at this time. As we get more information, we'll refine these numbers, and these will be based on bids. What we're showing is 1-inch water services, about $2,000 to $2,300 per unit. Where 1-inch water services in downtowns where the water services actually need to be brought into the buildings, we're estimated about $2,600 to $3,000. 6-inch commercial water services for fire service in the downtown properties, we're estimated in the neighborhood of about $6,000, $5,900 to $6,600. Sanitary sewer services, estimated about $1,800 to $2,000 per unit. And then for the street reconstruction, for the residential properties, $8,500 per unit. And for the non-residential, single-family residential properties, that's the commercial, institutional, multiple family properties, $147.33 per foot. And that's basically tying it to an equivalent residential property. Again, we are not anticipating any changes in the street assessment rates when the assessments will be held in the fall of 2020. Again, the rest of those, the estimated ones, those will be refined as we get closer. Just want to note that the feasibility study that was prepared in May is available on the city website. You can access it through the city's website or the project website. If you scroll down to the bottom on the left, there's access to the feasibility study. And there's a table that shows the estimated assessment rates for each property. The assessment process would be held in the fall of 2020, so everybody would be notified of their proposed assessment in fall of 2020. The assessment hearing would be held in the fall of 2020, presumably about October. There is a 30-day period where assessments can be paid interest-free if one wants to pay their assessment in full, or after 30 days, the balance is simply levied to the respective counties. And payable beginning in 2020 with the property taxes over a 15-year period. Interest rates are not known at this time, and it'll be based on the interest rates that the city gets when they sell the bond for their portion of the project. There are options for deferred assessments for basically those with homesteaded properties. And again, there'll be much more information provided in the fall of 2020 when the assessment information is sent out. So the proposed schedule, again, where we're at right now is we're holding the second public hearing. We're right now in the middle of the process of detailed project design for preparing basically bidding documents. construction documents, working through the final design. We will have a number of additional meetings yet. We are still planning. We haven't done much for one-on-one meetings with property owners, but as we're getting into this winter and into the spring, especially when we start talking about water and sewer services, we'll be meeting with those property owners a lot more frequently here. We're proposing to bid this project next fall in 2019 to prepare for construction in spring of 2020. And that would happen, begin right away early in 2020. And of course, the big project goal is to have the west end of this project open to pedestrians, completed so that we can hold Dojinki 2020 at least on the easterly or westerly portion of the project. So I'll be going out on a limb if that doesn't occur. So next steps, obviously we're continuing with the design. We have additional meetings. There'll be some information packets and questionnaires sent out. In fact, I think some information has been going out recently with a group of students that are touching base with property owners as well as part of a class activity. They're kind of doing our front reconnaissance, and we'll be following up after that. Again, one-on-one meetings, and the other thing that'll be starting here probably yet this winter and definitely into the spring is contacting property owners about acquisition of temporary construction easements. Before we get to questions, we're going to jump to a video that Nikki alluded to. So this is a visualization of the project, starting with this.
I don't want to cancel it down right now, but.
So obviously this is a rendering of what the project would look like after it's completed. There's a few little details that are yet not in the visualization, but shows the proposed lighting fixtures that are being proposed for the project. You see the many roundabouts. This is at First Avenue. Yeah, the proposed roadway is to be constructed with concrete. You really can tell from this surface. The crosswalks are proposed to be a different colored concrete rather than just painted, as well as the center islands. Some fencing there on the right, potential. Down by the library. I think we're going faster than 30 miles an hour.
Looking for Jim behind us here.
Parker. Okay, with that, I will turn it over to the council for questions. I guess the procedure here, we'll let the council ask any questions of staff and the project management team, and then after that, Mary, you can turn it over to the public for questions and comments.
Okay. Anyone have any questions for Chris or Nikki?
Can we put that video up on the city website or city?
Yep, there's a few tweaks we still need to do based on the stakeholder committee input in 2 weeks, but
Okay.
yep, the plan is to have that available for the public to see.
Okay, great. I had another question about the access and the buildings, the commercial buildings that are losing a driveway essentially out onto Main Street. And some of the business owners are concerned that it's going to affect their property value. I don't know if there's any studies that show that or not, but is there an opportunity for us to make changes with that and keep some of those accesses that where they want to have access out on the Main Street?
I can take it, so I can just come up. So again, Brett Posh, MnDOT District 7 Traffic. So I think we're pretty firm in our recommendations. We did take a pretty exhaustive look at every single access along the corridor, even ones that we weren't even thinking about closing, just to look at all the parcels themselves, look at the boundaries. And it's a bit of sausage making when you're making a determination. It's not just one simple factor as far as should access stay or go, but you look at the lot size, where it's located, where the access is at, how wide is it, how is the lot configured, where is the buildings and the commercial entrances, overhead doors, where is that located into the trunk highway. And then we have a pretty diverse group, like Nikki said, planners, engineers, designers, who all look and say, is this access needed? Is it suitable and reasonably convenient and suitable? And that's what we look for. So if we saw an access that, well, a good example is the Clark station. There's an access right on the corner. And as a traffic engineer, I don't like that at all. But we looked at that and we saw, well, it's really, if this is going to remain a gas station, that access has to stay. It's in one of the worst spots you can have an access. It's right on the corner. But we didn't want to, prohibit that use. So we made a determination that has to stay. The rest of them that we looked at, we thought they have reasonably convenient and suitable access. Now, if you lose a driveway to the trunk highway, is it going to be as convenient? No, you're losing an access, but we still think it's reasonably convenient and suitable.
If it could be demonstrated that they actually lose property value, is there anything that the state compensates the owners for, or?
Sure.
Or an appeal process, or maybe at this level, if we say, no, we want to keep these accesses?
The compensation piece, I leave to the lawyers. But again, we feel that we have recommended reasonable changes. And one thing Nikki hit on too is, this is common practice for all of our projects. Like Nikki said, if it was a mill and overlay, we'd probably just look at like the worst ones. But on these long-term projects, we get out the magnifying glass and we look at each one really close.
So these 11 access points, if we close, do you know how much parking space we need?
We did go through that exercise, and I don't have that number offhand right now, but we looked throughout the corridor. Here a second. We did a parking analysis along the corridor, so obviously we do gain access or parking when we do close access for some locations. We do lose parking for some of the mini roundabout construction, but we did also do an analysis that showed that even if we would have gone to, say, a traffic signal, we still would have had turn lanes that probably would have impacted parking as well. So the impacts of parking are based on the mini roundabouts and then some of the curb extensions, but yes, we would gain some parking at some of the locations.
Back to the money situation a little bit, and maybe Scott can chime in a little bit too to see if there is anything that we can do at the city level. But are you aware of in previous projects where that has affected property values of the individual units or the buildings that have lost access?
So all I can speak of is there was a MnDOT study that I was part of where we looked at, a little different, it was 394, so before it was Highway 12, where people had direct access onto Highway 12. It was converted to a freeway. So we did analysis looking back 10 years and had 10 years when that changed to basically people now had to get off of the freeway and come back on frontage roads to get to those properties. And that analysis showed that property values went up. Obviously, the roadway reconstruction helped with that. But so there is some of those studies. I think it's hard because each individual project varies. But MnDOT does some research that shows that the property values weren't affected as expected in terms of that project.
Thank you for that. That's a little different though from Main Street to 394. But like St. James, for example, when they went through theirs, was this?
I can't speak to that, but I do want to point out that the properties that we're talking about, you know, we're not removing access. So I'm just going to give an example of the bowling alley. So they right now it's proposed that they lose both access onto Main Street, but they would still have access off of Second. And so the idea is that they're not losing business because people have to drive 2 more seconds down Second to get into their access, right? When we look at things like a gas station or a convenience store, those are the type of places where, yes, if people are driving by and it's more inconvenient for them to have to go around the block to get to them, it may change people's behavior, but we didn't see that in any of these properties as changing behavior because of people having to go around the block or around the corner to get to them.
I guess I would question whether it changes pedestrian or, I think it does. And the one you cited, the bowling alley, they actually have to come down Second. And where they access in the back is really not a good access because you're just to the north of that, you have essentially an alley that's a mud hole and probably will be for quite some time. So if I were the owners of the bowling alley, they're not here, but I would certainly, at least I don't see them, I certainly would object to that one.
And what I did mention in my presentation is that we have reached out to all these property owners. We've offered to have sit-down meetings with them to talk through these changes. There has been a few that have accepted that offer, and Strike Force is one, so we've sat down and talked with them. We've had MnDOT available to answer questions as well. So we have tried reaching out to them, and we have successfully reached out to most of them. There's a few that we're still trying to send certified letters to get responses from, but we are trying to reach out and talk through these things. But you're right, their access is next to that alleyway, but I guess future, is that always going to be a mud pit? You know, someday it may change. Again, are people changing their behavior because they have to go up Second versus turning in on Main Street? I guess I think my answer is no. Or bowling, you're going bowling if you have to drive 2 seconds more or not. So those are the kind of things, you know, and we have talked to him about that access. He's requested if the city would allow a wider access to have better access into his property, and they've offered to consider that. So again, there's been some good back and forth with these property owners.
Scott, what are our options?
Bottom line, I haven't looked at any of the information directly that the engineers have put together, but these are situations that are very specific to each property, each individual property, how it's treated, what comes out. City certainly works with them, as Nikki pointed out, getting a wider access, something along those lines. If there's reasonable access to a property and it continues to service it in that fashion, it's difficult for compensation or required compensation to have to be paid at that point in time. Doesn't mean somebody can't try to make a claim for it, but I think it would be very difficult for them to do that. As to the devaluations of property, a new street coming by typically is not going to devalue the property even if access is removed. But again, it can be very unique and specific to a property where that could occur. Certainly we look at that. People have the opportunity to talk further with the engineers and with city staff and with MnDOT to see if there's other arrangements that can be made. And what I mean by that is what Nikki just described. If there's a wider access off the Second to service the bowling alley, that's what we try to do. And we can try to alleviate some of the pain of not having the access directly. These are unique situations. Staff will try to work with everybody as they can. And that's really what yeah, true. And MnDOT's making directive and it's the decision. The city is working with them, and as you can see, as the engineers have described, to try to come up with the best case scenario and what will best service the community needs.
Yeah, I see the individual I was referring to that owns the commercial property. You might want to speak during that, his, some more questions. I'm not sure, Terry, if you want to get up and talk, but, okay. But that's all I had.
Okay. Any other comments from the council, or any questions? Okay, if not, I'm going to open it up to a public hearing. If you want to make any comments or have any questions, please come to the podium, state your name and the address.
Terry Fay, 138 West Main, currently where Young Realty is, they lease the building there. And I met with these folks on the 14th and was instructed to come here to the public meeting, and with the assumption would be heard, but Friday in the mail, I already get the decision before the meeting. Is that customary?
What, I guess council's not aware of the decision, so you'll have to ask.
May I respond to that here? The question came up, Mr. Fahey came to the city offices after we met with him. I wanted to know what the position was, whether it would close or not close. So we did respond with a letter to him saying these are the reasons why we're proposing to close it. Certainly it didn't refrain him from attending this meeting.
Well, I guess the thing is, when the building was built in '82, they required 9 parking spots. So with this scenario, because the traffic flows around the building in either direction right now, now if we changed it to one-way coming in, that would be fine, but if we close that one, we're going to lose 2 parking spots. Either that, or they gotta, when they leave, they gotta back out onto First Street. And I have not been in a commercial parking lot where I have to back onto the street.
So, is there, I guess, Mike, from a standpoint of the size of the building, is there a certain requirement by the city to have or can?
There's no minimum parking requirement in the B1 district as at this time.
Okay.
There's no minimum parking requirement. They could have 0 today.
Well, when I built the building, we had to have that many.
Not required today.
When you decide to close an access, do you do a drive-through on paper or in your head? Is he correct when he says you'll have to back out on First Street?
I can answer that.
Sure.
So the way parking is currently done in that stall, they actually are backing up inside of the lot. I can see when they pull in to the front facing south.
Yes, but when the lot is full, they're also parallel parked along the curb, just adjacent to the building.
Sure.
So if the only way they can get in is off of First Street, they're going to be facing to the east, and if they can't get out, their only alternative is to back out onto First Street.
That makes sense. If the lot is jam-packed, the last person is going to have to back out.
So would you be comfortable eliminating some of your spots?
Not really. There's 9 people currently, they're agents, and obviously they sell real estate, so they come and go now. That doesn't account for all the people that come to buy and sell. And granted, there is probably very seldom that all 9 of them there at once. But 4 or 5, then you get 2 customers, you got a full parking lot.
And you're concerned that this is going to affect the...
Well, it's going to affect the parking folks, but just this little bit of snow we had here the day before yesterday, that uses up 1 parking spot. Now, I realize that's my problem, but every time we get just that little bit of snow, it costs me $250 to $300 just to haul the snow away. Because we need the room.
But ultimately, you, initially, when you first contacted me, you were worried that it would decrease the value of that property.
Well,
if
it
you were to
will,
sell
I'm
it.
sure it's gonna, anytime you, I disagree with these folks, I've real estate all my life, but anytime you take away an amenity to a property, you're gonna affect the value.
So, but in fact, aren't you gonna gain 1 or 2 parking spots on the road in front of your building with this access closed?
Well, possibly one, because we're right at the bump out.
Yeah, I don't know how much room is there now. Is there 1 spot right now?
No, well,
There is.
that's where the driveway is.
Okay, so
So
there,
if
you
that was
can,
eliminated, then there would be a parking spot there.
so right now, as a current configuration, a car cannot park from the bump out to your driveway?
No.
Okay. Okay,
I guess that's,
Well, do we have any options, Scott? I mean, can we request that MnDOT keep that one access open for a business owner that's
You can certainly
concerned
make that
about?
request, but as it was stated, MnDOT's pretty firm on what they're recommending and based on the design, what they're looking at and what the concept plan they've come up with. So certainly the council can make that request.
But even if the council makes it, the MnDOT's under no obligation
Correct.
to follow it with the joint powers.
they got the plan to say is what you're saying.
Yeah,
right, because it's not a city street, it's
I
a,
understand.
it's a highway.
Well, Terry, I'll make a motion for you that we request MnDOT to take another look at that and keep that access open for you.
I would like to amend that to not only look at that one, but I have a problem with the one at the bank and the bowling alley. I probably would others, but I have not gone to every one. So I will second your motion with a friendly, hopefully friendly,
Yeah, we can have those other two in my motion.
Okay, I think,
Well, wait, are we,
well, no,
we're stepping ahead.
well, you guys just stepped ahead a long time ago and you made the motion. We shouldn't have been making a motion.
Oh,
We can
At the
retract
public hearing.
We're still in the
temporarily.
public.
We're still in the public hearing, so we need to take a step back, so.
I'm not sure if our lot is affected, but we have a parking lot just between City Club and Wells Fargo, and it's a parking lot. I don't know if you're planning on closing that off or not. Okay, so that's going to remain open, okay.
You don't have any other access to that parking lot besides 19, so that's...
I would just say that one of the problems with messing with that is beer trucks from next door typically park in our parking lot. If they do not have that access, they'll park in the street. And that will essentially close off Main Street.
There's no plan for closure.
Good.
My name is Izad Menhas. I am the owner of a gas station on the corner, 401 West Main Street. My parking lot is very narrow, is 60 by 120, but with the building in there, the width is hardly 30 feet. And I was told that MnDOT is looking to close one of the access, and that's severely limit the use of that property because of the narrow, long parcel of the property. And so I really would like, if somebody needs to back out with one driveway, there's no place where you can turn around and come out of that place if there's enough cars in there. And then you have to back out on Highway 19. So which is not very good that people back out on the Highway 19 with only one access. And like I said, it's severely limit the use of this property. I'm renting that property right now. But, and we are looking to modify the property so we can have a little repair shop there. So with only one driveway, and it is almost impossible to have a repair shop. We were going to apply for the variance so we can have a little 12 by, I think, 16 by 16 repair shop attached to the building. So I really highly, I really request that please look into that thing closely and do not close that access. And that would definitely decrease the value of my property because it does limit the use of that property because of this narrow lot. Another thing is, I was told last time there's, even though my property value is only 100,000, I'm gonna get accessed 32,000 as the assessment for that property for the road improvement. And the property behind me is not gonna get anything because they don't have any frontage road attached to their house or something. So I'd really like to request consideration on that matter because, my narrow lot is 60 by 120, $32,000 is, and the value is only, last time was $92,000 on the city paperwork. So I would really like, consideration or reconsider the assessment of that property. And I need to know when the final decision is going to be made on the assessment, how much is going to be the assessment against my property, and when there's going to be final that yes, we're going to come out and close your access. So right now it looks like up in the air, but I need to know where I do stand.
Okay. I think the assessment hearing is fall of 2020.
Yeah, so the assessment statements would go out in the fall of 2020. And his comments at the last public hearing, we look back at that property, it is a little bit of an anomaly. If you look at all the other properties, they're narrow frontage and they're deep. His is the complete opposite. And I think there's probably could be some special consideration looked at when we look at the assessment for that property.
How come the house behind it doesn't get anything?
It is. It should be assessed. It's being probably assessed a single-family residential unit.
Oh.
And it has a narrow frontage where that driveway is, and that's all it's there. That's its access on the main street. So.
Okay. So is there 3 access points there then?
Technically 2 on the gas station property, and then 1 is for the residential property, but they're kind of almost, well, actually, no, they're not shared. There's like a light pole between the 2. So yeah, there's 3 driveways over there.
Okay.
What's proposed is to make one larger one to service the 2 properties, essentially built on the property line.
So like I suggested, because the building in place is not even 30 feet or some less than 30 feet, so you really have to back out the car from that parking lot, and it will really limit the use of my property. Thank you.
Okay.
Council, I'm Maureen. I'm a business owner on Main Street. I have a couple of questions. Since it is a trunk highway, I'd like to know how many are this narrow. 2, I'd like to know if there's any back alley use funds, reconstruction for use for business owners.
What business or property address are you at?
123 Main Street East. Closure of the sidewalks. I haven't heard how long they're going to be closed. So I guess those are my 3 questions. Roadway width, access to alley, some funds, reconstruction, and how long will the sidewalks be closed?
Okay. Who wants to start with the roadway width?
So I can't exactly answer your question as far as how many trunk highways are going to be this narrow. What I will say is that a lot of downtowns were constructed at a different time. I mean, some of them before the advent of cars. And when they were rebuilt in the 40s and 50s in the post-war era, it was all about the passenger car. How wide can we make it? Because if it's wider, I've got more room, right? It's going to be safer. That's the mechanistic way of thinking. I'm going to design it so it functions a certain way, and then I get the result I want. What we found empirically by looking at crash data is that those narrower sections, it's a little counterintuitive, those narrower sections are safer. And why is that? So when you drive down an alleyway and it feels pinched and narrow and you think a cat or a dog or a kid is going to jump out at you at any time, you're driving 10 miles per hour and you're ready to step on that brake. When we open that roadway up and it feels comfortable to drive, no matter what sign is posted, because speed limits don't control how fast anybody drives, you drive how fast the road naturally feels safe. So that's why when we get into these urban environments, we're really starting to dial that back and pinch that down. What I can tell you is the widths we have designed now are as wide as we can possibly go and still get the approval of our overlords in central office. So we are at the far edge of what they would approve. And it was a bit of a battle, right? City staff, yeah, we had some pretty heated arguments. There were concerns about pedestrian safety, that space between the driving lanes and the curbs, and how do you load people and how do you handle snow storage. I mean, we had some pretty heated discussions, and ultimately it was a mitigated dispute, I'll call dispute, gentleman dispute, between the city and the state. We both got something that I can live with and I can sleep well at night, and I hope the city staff and the folks who got to maintain it can live with it as well. So all I can say is it's at the widest that we could go right now. We can't go any wider. Does that answer your question? As best I can.
Still a little nervous with all the semis that
Yep.
come through there. It's narrow enough and you're gonna remove more feet.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I would say
It's tough when you open a door and you have a semi coming through. It's
yeah.
tough.
And I would say that is not a place to hang out. It's a place to get out of your vehicle and check your mirror, get out quickly, and then make your way to the curb. I will say that in St. James, they actually went quite a bit narrower. They went, so here we're at 12 and 10, 12 driving lane, 10 parking. Parts of St. James are at 11 and 9, so 2 feet narrower per side than what we're proposing here.
On 61?
On Highway 4 through St. James. So, like I said, we're at the widest we could possibly go. And if we open up the door again, which I don't want to do, but our central office would only say, you guys got to go narrower. We're comfortable with where we're at now. It's when everybody's equally unhappy, that's a good place to resolve it. I can live with it. I think the city can live with it, at least on the staff. But yeah, that's where we're at right now.
I'm just going to add to that real quick, and just again as a reminder, the street out there today really is too wide. From all engineering standpoint, it's too wide. Again, the width that's proposed is the same width that's down by Memorial, down by the park, down by the funeral home. So that width that you experience out there today is the width that you'll see in the downtown. I want to answer the question about closure of sidewalks. Sidewalks generally will not be closed. The sidewalks, because we're narrowing the road a little bit, the sidewalks up against the buildings will be left in place as long as possible. There'll be times when a sewer water service needs to be dug in. Obviously, there won't be through pedestrian traffic at that spot, but once it's done, gravel surface will be placed or some type of surface will be put back, and again, and those railings will be put in place. So there'll be access generally at all times, with the exception of the inconvenience of maybe having to come from a different side or different direction. Again, we have to maintain access to those buildings. Regarding access funds, I'm going to let either Ken or Mike talk about the small screen stuff. Yes, there are some options out there.
We have funding through both our 2016 and 2017 downtown commercial projects that we have advertised and provided information, but we would certainly be happy to follow up with you and go through the details of what the qualifications are and what that funding can be used for. We have that available through our EDA that there are certain restrictions because some of those are state funds. So there are criteria under the state small cities program that determines what can be done. We've done a number of projects in downtown, are looking for more, have funds for more, and we'll be happy to talk about it.
I have one more thought. Sorry. When you're reconstructing the water and the sanitary, usually there's access that needs to be remedied at the building site. Do you have any idea what the costs are for, or is this complete?
So the question again being the cost for, so the numbers that we showed were estimates to bring water into the building and reconnect it into the building. Again, we'll have better numbers as we get further along. Sewer service was a connection out to exterior of the building, and again, that would be the full assessment as part of the project. There will be the need to work with property owners, especially the downtown buildings, to actually be able to get a plumber into the building to help with the reconnection of the water from the temporary line to the new permanent line. If that answers the question.
So Chris, I think maybe what she was asking was when you make the connection to the water lines, that they have to go into the building. The plumber, there's a plumber there, that is the owner's cost, in addition to what the assessment says now.
We're still working out the details, but what we think, or the direction that we're going, is that we would bid this out so that there is the option to bring it to the building as well as to bring it into the building as part of this project. That the general contractor would actually have a plumber subcontractor in the contract to make that connection inside the building, or property owner would obviously have the option to hire their own plumber to do that work as well. So there would be a second portion of the assessment, or water service to the building, as well as bringing it into the building. Or they could bring it into the building themselves with their own plumber.
Okay, I didn't understand that. Thank you.
Yeah, and those are still some details we're working out. This isn't an easy solution necessarily.
Just like to know when this final decision will be made regarding eliminating access point, and what is the appeal process is, if there is any.
If he's making a request, or if we, the council, after the public hearing, make a request to MnDOT to reevaluate those properties that we listed in the motion, and I'll include the car lot when we finally do make that motion, with the understanding that ultimately it's your decision, when could he expect? I mean, we go back and maybe re-talk about it with that design group or something and say, hey, listen, these business owners have some real concerns with it. Is that do you guys meet monthly, weekly?
Our PMT meets monthly.
Okay.
I guess I'm kind of referring to MnDOT here, but obviously there's different, MnDOT has made their recommendation. So what we have on the layout right now is what MnDOT recommends, and like I said, they're pretty firm in their recommendations. The next steps will be based on whatever the city council's, whatever measures you take tonight. But like I said, it's going to have to follow a legal process to come up with if there is still going to be a take, if there's any reimbursement, you know what I mean? So it's hard to say when a fast and hard decision is going to be made, because there will continue to be recourse until the project is designed and built. So even with these recommendations and with the moving forward, there's still this right-of-way process that has to happen, so there's going to be easement that's needed as part of that process. There'll be a look to see if there's any reimbursement for the change in access and if that's applied or not. And I think Scott made a good point that it's very difficult to make that argument that there is going to be some kind of financial impact to the property because of that change in access, but that is a recourse that every property owner has that they can take.
Well, you see where our feeling is. We're trying to do what's best for our business owners, and they're requesting us that we kindly ask whether or not you guys accept that or take a look at it, whatever. So that's all I have.
Nikki, just to get clarification in your comment, the right-of-way issue with gaining those rights away, those don't involve any of the closures that you're referring to.
It will include the closures. Again, it's part of the right-of-way process. They'll look at that. I'm making sure I'm not saying something out of turn here, but...
Say that one more time.
Well, just as part of the right-of-way, even through easements, taking away that access, it'll be part of the right-of-way review to see if there would be compensation because of that access change or not.
Be evaluations done on it, but looking at from MnDOT's gave our recommendation, that Brett and Nikki gave through the presentation, it was not just one person at MnDOT making that recommendation. It was looked at fully. There's a number of accesses that geometrically wise are between offset intersections, so there were some safety factors considered and reasons for those closures. Other ones had access immediately off of a side street. So MnDOT does have some authority to remove accesses if we were to be doing this project on our own. That's partly why the recommendations were made. There are reasons listed, I guess, for the specific one, that letter that's attached, that's handed out. The one does identify the reasons that were considered. So there wasn't just a random analysis like Fred had said before. All the driveways, whether they stayed open or were closed, were all evaluated, the whole project corridor. So at this point, that's MnDOT's recommendation. If the city is not in agreement with that, we can certainly go back and meet with the property owners. If there are circumstances we're not aware of or evaluate, we can do that. That is the initial position right now as shown on the layout.
Nikki, just maybe I misunderstand. Did you say something about negotiating the easements when you were making that comment?
Right, so it's part of the...
And that's separate than the driveway issue?
Correct. Correct.
Okay, so that has to be negotiated, but that's...
Yeah. Sorry,
that's a
separate
task
things,
that...
but it'll probably happen at the same time. You know,
Right.
So
The right-of-way is a MnDOT call, and that's...
Well, so they're both a MnDOT call, right? So the closing of the access and asking for the easement needs for the construction.
Right, there is monetary requirements and things like that.
Right,
That's
so
a different
there's
process.
potential compensation for
Yeah.
both
And
permanent
that's-
right-of-way and temporary easements.
And that's common that they pay for those.
Correct.
What's confusing always is you're using the word recommendation, and it might not be a strong enough word.
True.
Thank you.
I was in the commercial construction business for about 25 years. We used to have something called critical path scheduling for projects. In this case, I guess I'd appreciate some idea of how it's going to go. Are you going to end up with a 1 mile long, 40-foot deep trench? Or is it going to be done in sequences? Just kind of so that we can anticipate what to put up with.
Yeah, good question. So the question being, again, what is kind of the sequence or order of construction that we anticipate? The project will start in the west end. It's going to start down by the creek because that's the low end. That's where the direction where the sanitary sewer flows. That's where the storm sewer flows. That's where you start construction. The project will probably be opened up a couple blocks at a time during phasing, meaning pavement removal, a couple blocks, 2 or 3 blocks. Utilities, they start utilities and it becomes a train. So the area that's started first will be completed first. There's also the possibility that the project could happen in, we talked to a contractor to look at how this might be phased. And there's another storm sewer that goes through Memorial Park. So there's potential of a second crew maybe starting down by Memorial Park where the storm sewer goes through that area. So no, the idea is we don't remove a whole mile of pavement and then start digging in trenches, and it's done in phases, and so things are completed as it goes. Again, there won't be any roadway traffic traffic on the roadway, but the intent is again to keep pedestrian traffic open to all those buildings and businesses. Roadway traffic will have to access on side streets. There'll be a few locations again where cross traffic will be maintained, and when there's opportunities to open up cross traffic, that'll also be done as well. So hopefully that kind of answers the question. Again, we're looking early start in spring of 2020 down on that west end, and having kind of that westerly half of the project open to pedestrian traffic for Dojinki by September. It's a reasonable schedule for that size of project. Ultimately, there's going to be work that'll probably happen up until late October into November before the project's wrapped up, and there's the likelihood of touch-up work, finish work, landscape work that would happen in 2021.
Okay, if there's no other comment.
Art Wong, and business at 200 Main Street East. Of course, I'm going to be located on a roundabout, and we have numerous semis coming to our location throughout the week, sometimes a couple a day, and other delivery vehicles constantly. Concern. During the time that roundabout is being constructed and Main Street is closed, I'm going to have to get those vehicles large to my site. And driving from the south going north towards Main Street, trying to get that vehicle into my parking lot to drop off that paper product, and then get it back down that street without trying to back that semi-rig all the way back down the street. If there's any parking along there, it's going to be very difficult. And for all the pedestrian traffic, that's where they're going to have to park. I'm not sure how this involves the construction flow of things. I understand once the roundabout is constructed, they can come down, no problem, and it's going to drive over the thing, and it's going to make the corner, no big deal. But during that construction phase, how do I get those vehicles in and out?
I don't have an answer other than when I look at it. We'll have to know, we need to know details. That's part of our meeting with one-on-one meetings with property owners, is to understand what unique circumstances they have, and there'll have to be accommodations made both by the property owners as well as what we can do. But I can say that when there's a 15-foot deep sanitary sewer trench going through that intersection, there's nothing going through that intersection at that time.
But I don't think that would be any difference if we weren't putting a roundabout in there. The street construction would be the street construction. So I don't think the concern, Art, is, my understanding, it's not really the roundabout. It's just how the access, are you concerned at that time, do we have to temporarily only be able to park on one side of the road there to give enough room? And I think that's what Chris and Nikki are saying, is that we'll have to evaluate those access points.
Because if you block both sides with blocked traffic parked, you can't maneuver that semi-rig around to get it in because there's not enough street space. So what are we going to do?
Right. Any other comments? If not, I guess I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Second by Dave Brusick.
That would be both hearings.
Both public hearings. Make a motion to close both public hearings. And Dave,
Second.
second. There's no other comments from the council or anything? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay. So the public hearings are closed. Before we jump into, Sean, I know you want to make a motion, and that I think one of the things we have to be concerned about is that we need to, we haven't looked at any of these access closures, Sean, and making statements that, we're going to look at this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, based on what you know. I'd be very leery to go down that path. I'm just telling you my position on that. We haven't been involved in the process that MnDOT and the city engineers have. So, but Chris, you were gonna.
When you're done.
No, I'm done.
Okay. So, I guess I wanted to remind you again, there's 3 items in here for your consideration. Obviously, you don't have to make a decision on any of them tonight, but there are 2 that are probably pretty straightforward, and that is consideration of the resolution ordering the improvement. Basically, the same resolution that you approved back in June 4th. Again, this one was basically done for the second public hearing. And again, we noted a date far enough out that, again, that this project would be under contract to cover us by a state statute. So the first one would be, again, resolution ordering the improvement, if you want to consider that. And then the other one that's pretty straightforward is concurrence with the temporary occupancy. Again, that's the ability to put that storm sewer through Memorial Park with this project. The last one, again, the one that whether you want to act on it tonight or consider it at a later date, is the approval of the final layout, which is the municipal consent. Again, approval of the layout as proposed.
Mike, which one is the one that we have up to 90 days?
But I think what I'm just going to ask Chris, if he would identify for the council benefit and the public benefit, the understanding of what's involved in this action as it relates to providing municipal concurrence, as you think of whether you're going to approve or not approve it, the time frame, and what the alternatives are that go with that. I think it is important that you understand that as you raise the question or issue likely with access. So Chris, if you'll walk through for the council's benefit, I think it's important that they understand what the decision issue that they have relative to the approval of the drawing, the roadway.
Yeah. So one of the resolutions,
the layout.
For your consideration is what they call a resolution approval of the final layout, or what we also refer to as municipal consent. Under state statute, you have 90 days from the time of this hearing to consider either approval or denial of municipal consent. Obviously, since the city is leading this and we have a team that's proceeding with plans, it would not be real convenient for us to wait 90 days, not knowing where you stand on that. But it is an item you do not need to make a decision on tonight, if you so desire. But again, that municipal consent is basically proven the concept of the geometrics, the traffic control, the mini roundabouts, the road widths, the right-of-way acquisition, as well as the proposed access closures as proposed. Am I forgetting anything?
You want to explain or go through the options relative to what came from MnDOT. If there is ultimately a disagreement over some or any parts of that, what those options are. What the piece
Okay.
in here, just that they understand the scope of what they're up against, that you can think that you're going to want to take a position on a certain aspect of it. If it's within MnDOT's control, you may or may not be able to just decide to withhold approval, necessarily get the change where you want. And so I want you to clearly understand the scope of Scott's help here is to understand what the decision-making capabilities are. If for any reason there's disagreement over what those changes are, then the process that's there, should you decide to avail yourself of that. So maybe with that, Scott, you want to take a stab at that? Or-
Sure. And Chris was, I think, jumping into it a little bit too, but Sean raised the issue of can we ask, can we request something different with the project? Sure you can. That's part of the process, part of the statutory option here. I think Chris gave you a copy of the statute that lays that out. There's an appeal board you can go to. There's a number of time periods that are there. Obviously, if you make that request, MnDOT staff looks at it, makes a determination, either they stick with the recommendation or, as Bruce referred to it, stronger than a recommendation. It's really the position of what MnDOT's taken at this point in time. Or they make changes based on what's discussed with our city engineers. If it's still not an agreement, then you have the rights to go to the appeal board. That's a whole other process, whole other time frame. We can discuss that, but that's down the road from what you would do if you follow what Sean was proposing.
Excuse me, so I don't want to delay the project or anything. I mean, I want this to go through. I think we need it to go through. I don't think it hurts to go on record just to say, to ask as a council on behalf of the business owners who have concerns about it to re-look at it. They still might say no, nothing will change. But if we just ask that they reevaluate that isn't going to delay anything, right?
I think it's more of a question for Chris on the process and timing here, but I mean, that's built into the statute to have this process. Yeah.
Right, but I don't want to delay anything. I don't want to put anybody, if I'm handcuffed and they've already made the decision, then I have to go to Terry and the other business owners and tell them I did what I could. But if we can just ask them to reevaluate it or to take another look at it and go on record, then I've done my part as representing the business owners of this town. And ultimately left it there. I don't want to delay anything. So will this delay it if we make that motion, if Dave and I go through it? Just asking them?
I don't know that I can answer that question. I'd say from our standpoint, a short delay in approval of the final layout is not necessarily an issue. Again, the city is leading this project. If this would be a whole different story if MnDOT was coming in, MnDOT was leading this, and you felt you weren't in control. In terms of us looking at the access items that you brought up, one possible solution might be for us to provide you a little bit more information on those exact accesses and why those decisions were made. I'm not sure, you know some of the details that everybody's gone through. That's something that could be provided. Ultimately, if this thing is going to sit for 90 days, so the process basically says you have, within 90 days, you can approve or disapprove of the layout. And then again, if you disapprove, there's the whole process you go through. If you do nothing in 90 days, it's automatically approved. If we wait 90 days, we have a problem because it's going to leave the team hanging on where we're going with the design if there's things that need to be revised. Again, a short delay to provide a little more information regarding driveway accesses, I think is probably something that's reasonable that we can do, if that would help. And I'm open to any other comments from folks.
Add to that, I guess, as far as the access, we can look at it, look at other alternatives, whether we can slide an access, we can make it more beneficial for the access to that property. for reducing, whether there's 2 or 3, reducing it down to 1, that's something we can work with the property owner on. As far as sliding it, there's other, some maneuvers we can look at to see, okay, is that consistent with what we went into the original information as we reviewed it, access-wise, as far as maneuverability of vehicles, if it, we can look at that. Not to say that the recommendations won't change, but I think timeline-wise, I think from the city's perspective, they would need a resolution quicker than later.
So if we go ahead and grant this now, you're telling us right now that you'll still take a look at it, or do you want to potentially have the council just ask you?
I guess the council doesn't need to make that decision tonight, as well, approve or disapprove it, but within that certain timeline, you would have to approve it. As Chris stated earlier, at 90 days, if you don't act on it, then it does get. For the next week or so, we can review different options, get back that information, as Chris mentioned, and more supporting information as to why these closures were chosen. We can certainly do that.
I have a question, just for clarification. Were the access points, was that known at the previous hearing? And was this issue discussed at the, since this is just a second time around because of the timeline on it, I'm just surprised we have this kind of issue coming up at the end here.
Yeah, well, again, this is a dual hearing right now, so this was, so the previous public hearing, that was still, we knew more or less where the access closures were going to be, but that wasn't part of the first public hearing.
Okay.
The feasibility hearing, again, we're doing a dual hearing right now, feasibility hearing as well as the municipal consent, which
Okay, thank you.
specifically gets into access. Maybe I can offer one thing to help move this along is we provide you a little additional information regarding those specific drives, access closures, and something you can consider in 2 weeks. If that's something you'd be interested in.
I would agree with Chris, because if you go ahead and approve it, you're really obviating the need for any further MnDOT review. If you disapprove, then you start into a whole other process. So I think if you just defer the decision for 2 weeks, get the information from the engineers, and then make that determination.
So the information would be that you would reevaluate those access points and talk to the business owners or listen to their concern or see if there's another, as you said, slide it over.
I guess I'll defer to the team a little bit. I think, again, providing you a little different additional information, and if that means that we need to contact those property owners and see, we'll certainly try to do that. If we can do that in 2 weeks, that would be a question.
And just to clarify, Scott, your comment about if we approve it, then we lose our leverage to do anything. Is the same true from the other side? If we approve it, MnDOT can't change the access points that are in this layout?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Or do we have to come back again and reapproval later?
Yeah, that's, and I think that what was explained earlier, what you have up on the wall right there is a concept. It's not in design right now.
Well, it's more than a concept, because we're talking about exact access
Yeah,
points.
no, I get that. I don't know if they're saying that these are to the inch. That I don't know. Chris, that's more of a question for you. But it's got to be done close. I agree with you on that part. So, yeah, the recommendation is pretty strong. It's going to be that layout, very close to it. Correct.
So they couldn't change an access point from the layout that's approved. That's good.
I mean,
It's a
you already
joint-
gave municipal consent for
Well, it's a
that.
joint project, so we both have to approve. I assume
Yeah.
it would be true that
Yeah.
once we approve it, they can't change it without our...
There would be nothing dramatically changed unless there's some additional information that comes out through the detailed project design, and it would be something that's, it wouldn't be an access closure, certainly without an approval, but there may be a revision on a driveway width or a slight location of that, things like that are just, that's part of the detailed design. But the concept is still as it is.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just want to understand what we're approving here.
The 11 access points that they're proposing, recommending are going to be closed. Now, if they're
Moved.
if something is moved, so that it benefits an access point that was closed, that might change.
I guess I'd like to share my opinion. I believe our job is to look toward the life of this project, which is 20 to 30 years. And we can't necessarily look at how Mr. Fahey uses his lot right now, because that could change in 10 years. It might be using it in a different way. The only question I have is the auto lot. I can't see people coming in and out of that way. That's the only access closure that I kind of question. But I don't think we should get wrapped up into how the property is currently used, because we have to look at the overall picture. We've had a team that looked at it. They have wealth of information that we don't have about many different aspects of it. So I'm not quite sure getting more information is going to be helpful.
Question for, Scott. I mean, we could approve like B and C and just want, because I don't have any clue which 11 access points are closed, are being recommended to be closed. I think the only one we've discussed on council was the Wells Fargo one, correct, Mike?
That's the one that you had to take an action on.
Right, we took an action on that already, David, closing that one.
Yes, well, I made an opinion and it wasn't
Right.
accepted, so that's...
Well,
that's
no, your opinion was accepted, the vote was not in favor.
For clarification, the action that you took was to allow or to agree on behalf of the city that the city would allow, assuming MnDOT closes the westerly access of Wells Fargo as part of the layout plan, that we would provide a connecting link off 2nd Avenue.
Right.
You didn't formally approve closing
Right.
the MnDOT access point, but knowing that it's likely to come, what were the alternatives and what could we do to resolve that?
To say something regarding Kay's opinion. Unlike, I think, anybody else in this audience, I've been a member on and off of this community for 76 years. I went through the 1950s Main Street project. I went through here on this council with Kay over the last downtown streetscape, and I'm going through it a third time. I don't like the fact New Prague was here long before MnDOT was ever a question. At the last streetscape project, none of this was ever brought up. I can recall the entrances and exits off of Main Street were as they were at the time. Now all of a sudden you come around and say, we got the right to close 11 of these accesses. To me, that is not right. I realize you have the authority to do it, but I don't like the authority, and I don't think you're using a lot of common sense. That's why I'm reacting the way I am. I'm a little bit upset with MnDOT. Won't be the first time. Hopefully it's the last. But that's why I would like to have 2 more weeks. And I'd like your thoughts to go through those few access points that were brought up tonight and come back in 2 weeks after you've thought some common sense and tell us what you're going to do. Is that fair? So I would suggest on letter D, we table that for 2 weeks. That's my opinion.
Okay, well, let's just take these in order here, okay? The first one, Chris, is the resolution ordering improvement preparation of plans. What are we approving? What is the resolution actually saying to us that we're approving?
Basically, you are ordering the project. You're saying that your intent is to proceed with the project. Your intent to move forward with the project. This is the same process we follow with every public improvement. This is kind of that first step before we begin. Usually before we begin detailed design and bidding documents. We're obviously in the middle of that right now. This is unique here because we're doing this kind of again because of the size of this project. It won't be under construction contract within a year since the last public hearing. So we're basically doing a redo here. So if your intent is to proceed with this project, well, at least that part is what you're acting on. And again, it does require 4 votes because this is a council-initiated project.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions regarding letter B, the resolution to improvement preparation plan, basically continuing going forward with the project? Any comments?
I have no problem with that one.
Okay.
Or C.
So I guess I'll look for a motion to approve that resolution.
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion by Dave Brusick, seconded by Kay Wilcox to approve the resolution ordering improvement preparation of plans. So if there's no other comments, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, passes 5-0. C has to do with Memorial Park, and that we're just basically, because it's public land, we're just giving the okay to do that.
That is correct. It's a joint sewer that serves both MnDOT and the city, so as part of the reconstruction project, we need to replace that across that parkland. It's just the city getting concurrence and authorization to do that work, and that there's no adverse impact. As part of our environmental reviews that are required, since as Chris mentioned earlier, there are federal funds involved.
Okay, thank you for your clarification. Any questions regarding letter C? Okay.
There's no resolution on this one. You have on the
The recommendation is basically authorizing the mayor to enter into the agreement or sign to sign the MnDOT temporary access letter. Basically acknowledging the concurrence with the proposed work.
This is the letter and the plan information that was behind the packet of information from MnDOT. It's got on there, it's
The one that's
letter addressed to the mayor dated November 19th. And what it is clarifying on page 2 of the letter is that the duration of the occupancy will be temporary in nature. There will be no change in ownership of the land. The scope of the work will be that will be performed will be minor, and that there's no anticipated permanent adverse physical impacts nor any interference with the activities or purposes of the property on either a permanent or temporary basis. And so it's the one that's got the plan sheet behind it that is basically where the storm sewer will be reconstructed. We touch a corner a little bit of the outfield fence, but it basically is a rerouting and improvement of a new storm sewer through that vicinity in the park.
So the motion is to authorize me to...
The council's action should be a motion and a second to basically you concur with the assessment of the proposed impacts to Memorial Park as described within the letter, and then authorize the mayor to execute that letter to MnDOT.
I will so move.
Second.
I think a motion by Kay Wilcox, second by Sean Ryan. There's no other comments. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, 5-0. So now we're to letter D. Based on what I'm hearing, it looks like if we're in concurrent that we're going to table this for 2 weeks and see if maybe we can get a little more information of the actual 11 accesses that are being proposed to be closed, and maybe some situations need to be discussed with the property owners if possible before the next meeting. Does that sound fair to everyone?
I thought it was just the 4 that you brought up. Is that right? Or is it all 11?
Well, we want to know, personally, I'd like to know which 11 accesses are being closed.
Okay.
You know, The ones that we mentioned, yeah, I would think those would be definitely the ones that we would like to get some additional interaction with the property owner, because there could be, like the gentleman was saying, they may be looking at, besides just having a car lot there, they may be looking at a repair spot, and how is that going to be affected if there's only one location?
Yes.
So
So
there-
that is, down to Realty, the car dealership, the bowling alley,
And Wells Fargo.
and Wells Fargo.
Yeah. If you could be so kind. Okay. Thank you for your patience and your information on this, and hopefully we can get this all addressed at the December 17th meeting so that we can move forward. Thank you. Okay. 2019 Street Utility Improvement Project. Is that you, Krista? Are you getting overtime?
I almost forgot about this. Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. Before you for your consideration is two items. First is the Scott County Memorandum of Understanding. I'm not exactly sure how it appears in your agenda report, but it was created as page 6 to our engineering services agreement with the city. Basically, Scott County agreeing to cooperate with the city of New Prague in preparing the final design and bidding services associated with the 2019 project. If you recall, the 2019 project includes the pavement replacement of all the pavement and rehabilitation work on County Road 37 from Trunk Highway 21 all the way down to Trunk Highway 19. They've asked the city to lead the project. It fits well with the city's project in terms of the nature of the work. And this by entering into the memorandum of understanding that allowed us to get going on the final design. And then we'll be working with them to create a cooperative agreement that would be brought back to the council prior to an award of construction contract. So this memorandum of understanding between Scott County and the city takes us through, again, bidding of the final design and bidding of the project. And then with that is, followed up with that is, again, our proposed professional services agreement for final design and bidding services associated with the project. I guess with that, I'll entertain any questions. You did at the last council meeting, you actually ordered the improvement, but we didn't have an agreement to keep going on design.
Okay. It's pretty boilerplate agreement.
Correct. It's no different than what you've seen in the past. The only difference is usually I come in at this time and we will have the professional services agreement take it right through construction. But because we're working with Scott County, having to work through a cooperative agreement, it was much easier just to take this to bidding, and then we'll come back with another agreement at the time of, before we award a construction contract. We'll have a cooperative agreement, and we'll have another engineering agreement that'll take us to construction. So this is the only difference at this time, it's just through bidding.
Okay. Any questions on this?
Yeah, I believe you should have.
No, in your packet is that you do not have the executed copy from Scott County. That came in after this was already put together. So Scott County has executed the agreement, and they're just waiting for us.
Okay. Any questions?
I'm not sure I guess more staff question, this agreement, I'm looking at the easement acquisition efforts, and when it says that's a city task, are you prepared to do that work?
Actually, if I could explain
City
really what that
administrator.
means, when I say city task, is there's some tasks here that are county only, the county's
Oh,
covering all
okay,
the
I'm
costs,
sorry.
and this is one of the.
But you would still be doing that work?
I would be providing that work, and again, those two tasks, 9091, a city task and a county task, those are somewhat a little bit unknown at this time. Until we get into the final design on the mini roundabouts and exactly where the sidewalk is, we don't know if we need any easement for the sidewalk.
Okay, I was understanding that maybe Mike with the new hip is going to need to run around seeing these easements. Okay.
So then when we get acquired easements through city project, we work with staff to do that, but we provide the technical or description, things like that when needed. So.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I guess I'll make a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding with Scott County.
Second.
Second by Sean Ryan. If there's no other questions, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay.
And as Chris stated, that's only for final design and bidding.
Right. Okay, and then we just have to approve SEH being the engineering service agreement. Is that, okay? I guess I'll make a motion that SEH is engineering service agreement for final design and bidding.
Second.
Second by Sean Ryan. There's no other comments. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think you can go home now, Chris. Next, we have Wade. Are you still Wade?
Yes, sir.
Wade is just gonna, due to the fact that the meeting before our budget workshop, the golf board did not have a quorum, so we did meet the following Tuesday and to finalize the budget. And, go ahead.
Where would you like to start? And I'm glad I can borrow the printout from back there because I couldn't read the one I printed from home. I do have my cheaters back there, so you don't know.
I guess just kind of walk us through the process of some of the revenue increases and then,
Sure.
Just I have a point of clarification. Which packet of information are we going to be referring to?
the one that was,
This one or this one?
yeah, I would go with, that's the October, isn't it? October results.
Okay.
Or is that the
You should have
Projected information.
in your packet that's
Yeah, this is the one.
Okay.
the one that you had in the previous packet is updated by this one.
Oh, this is the most current?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm looking at the summary that Patty put together on page 1, and it's listing on the revenue side increases that we have put in place on golf membership, green fees, daily cart fees, and driving range. So we have increased the memberships by 2% this year, so for 2019. The previous year, we actually increased at a rate of 3%, so it's 5% over the last 2 years. And then to try to make our memberships more valuable, we're looking at increasing green fees and green fees on a little bit higher rate than we had in the past. So instead of keeping them flat or $1 per round increase, based on what we're seeing from the courses that are nearby from a competitive standpoint, we made the recommendation to bump that up a little bit higher. And then in terms of food and beverage increases, to really be at more competitive rates, we're just adjusting based on what we see from a competitive standpoint again. Any specific questions on that?
I don't want to disrupt your train of thought, but I'm not familiar with what food services are offered there now. Do you have a dining option?
It's really dining that's open during the golf season. So we're using the grill. So it's burgers, sandwiches, deep fried food. Those are the kinds of offerings that we offer to guest members that are up in the bar, basically.
And then, well, wasn't a new kitchen put in there a while ago?
In 2006, I believe, there was a remodel. So what they did with the bar area is they created kind of a short order grill and deep fryer that's, it's right behind the bar area. That's what we're using in terms of what we do for our members or our guests on a regular daily basis when the golf course is open. We do other private events that we cater in. We don't have the staff to be able to, like old school when Scott was the manager where he had people actually preparing meals. We just aren't capable of doing that anymore. So everything for private groups is catered in.
Okay, thanks.
So that's what we did from a revenue standpoint, and some of the adjustments I made in the budget were based on, looking at raw data to see how many beverages we serve on a regular basis, and we calculated increases based on that information. And we also, in terms of the revenues and we try to be conservative. In terms of the revenues we would gain as far as green fees at a $2 per round increase, on average we have in the neighborhood of about 10,000 green fee rounds per year. So 10,000 rounds by a $2 increase would be, approximately a $20,000 increase in greens fee revenues. And we bumped that up 15,000 instead of the 20,000 that we could calculate based on history. So we try to be conservative with our revenues when we make some estimates looking at history and actual raw data. And I'd certainly be happy to answer any budget-specific questions that you might have on the revenue or the expense side.
I think one thing that we were trying to goal of the golf board was to try to at least break even on cash flow. Simple cash flow. I mean, we're showing 132,000 loss, but depreciation is 122,000, and we have about a $8,900 or $9,000 difference on our principal interest versus our schedule. So that's about 131,000. That would be how we kind of came up with our goal was if we could just cash flow the operations.
Just generally our performance, this is year 8. We started this in 2011 with the proposal that I had made in 2010. So the data that we have in 2011 through 2017, we have negative cash flow over that 7-year period of time of about $20,000. There is something unique in 2012, and this is the back sheet where there was a street assessment that was forgiven. So that number is adjusted up a little bit if you're looking at the net income or loss. So I sort of back calculated that out of my my calculation. Oh,
yeah, that was
there was some kind of a write-off. I thought it was the assessment of the.
No, it was a one-time forgiveness because we were overstating our reserves because it was an intercompany.
It was an interfund advance.
Yes, so that was something the council made back then to forgive that because we felt we were overstating our reserves.
So when I adjusted that out, we're at about basically a break even in terms of net income and loss over the last 7 years.
Any questions anyone has?
Just to verify what you just said, Chuck, I'm coming pretty close to a break-even cash, is what you're saying?
Yeah, because if you look, our depreciation is 122, and then we have a principal and interest schedule. I don't know if it's attached, but
Yeah, it's on there.
112, 113.
yeah, and because the interest is already built in the financials, that would be your difference, about $8,000. So that gets you about 131.
And then something in the numbers, I thought I saw that, was there a interfund loan last year?
Oh, yeah, we did we purchased some equipment, but it was such a small amount that the city.
It was
Yeah.
golf cart, it was a golf cart.
No, he's talking about from last year, I think it was about $60,000 of equipment that we bought. The city is loaning us on a loan, like we did with the golf carts, right? So, yes, it's on a, what is it, twice a year, Patty?
Twice a year.
Yeah, twice a year, payments are due.
But that's not on the schedule.
Yes, it is.
It is on the schedule.
The 2017 and 18, Bruce, toward the bottom.
I'm looking at the outstanding debts.
Outstanding debt issues?
Right.
Yeah, the 2017 general fund loan.
Oh,
The
it's at
2018.
15,000 per
Pardon?
year? 15,000 a year?
The two combined?
Okay.
The 17 is,
What's the last one? I'm sorry.
yeah, the last one is the
Yeah.
56,000 that we bought last year.
Makes sense.
And then the other thing is, we basically, the golf board basically stated that they were not going to look at any equipment purchases this year to see how the results were, so.
And Wade, I think you talked about this already, but I haven't heard what you said. You're still projecting an increase in rounds for next year?
As you look at, year to year, what we're trying to do is use rounds of golf as an indicator of what we can generate in revenue for operations as well as food and beverage, and we're challenged a little bit by that. So over like 2015, 16, and 17, I looked at total numbers of rounds, total revenues to try to make an estimate of what we do year in, year out in terms of dollars per round that we capture or revenue per round that we capture in food and beverage. I don't see that data on here, but as we were examining the budget overall, I estimated somewhere in the neighborhood of 22 or 23,000 rounds of golf. I think this year, to find the data, we're in the 20 to 21,000 rounds of golf, and we didn't really capture a round of golf in the month of April. So we got off to a bit of a late start, so we're a little bit like farmers when it comes to the weather. So it's hard to estimate that.
But you are projecting next year to be higher than the previous 2 years, but
Yes.
not by dramatic.
Correct.
Right. I think one year we had a peak of 26,000 almost. Is that?
6-7.
Yeah.
Yes, in 2006, 2007 is when we had those kinds of rounds of golf.
Yeah, so we kind of took an average. If you looked at the last 5 years, and it was around 22,500. So we used a little like 23,000. But some of the interesting facts were that last year we had more non-resident or non-member rounds than the year before, and we think it was because it was a late start. A lot of people are like, well, I only played 30 rounds of golf, so I'm just going to pay for golf. So it depends on how early you start. People do the math that And that was one of the things that we decided, if we raise our green fees up a little bit more, then the math becomes that someone said, oh, I'm going to become a member because now, it's my 30 rounds, I'm going to come out with a little better deal. So that was some of the logic that we used. But we still look at total rounds, and we're still averaging the last 5 years around 22,000.
You feel pretty good about the break even cash, or is it just, the numbers just back to work?
If I had a crystal ball, Bruce, I would say, I feel good because I think we're conservative. We didn't take the full 20,000 as revenue. If you were a half full kind of guy or a salesman, but I looked at it more as an account and kind of looked at those things. So again, the earlier the start, the better. I think last year, like you said, I think our first rounds were April 28th. And I think the year before that, we had like, I think the 1,200 or 1,500 rounds in April.
We got a little bit of an early start in 2017, but then had kind of crummy weather throughout the spring, so it balanced a little bit this year because we did really have nice weather after we finally did, get into May. We tried to look at rounds of golf per month as a weather indicator so that we can compare year to year. We talk about that month in, month out at our golf board meetings. That's part of your, I think I have that as a piece of this, and if not, I'll share it with Barb and Mike so that it can get in your hands, but we do have it here. So if you look at the rounds of golf, starting in 14 through, I have two 2017s here. I have a typo here. But I can determine the rounds of golf that are played and whether they're green fee rounds or member rounds. And like Chuck mentioned, because we got off to a late start this year, some folks that were members previously just decided to pay as they go. And we do have a little bit over 2,000 additional green fee rounds this year than we did last. So I think either way it's good for the golf course. We might be better off with the green fees in some cases than the membership fees, but we are trying to make that membership more valuable.
Is there anything changing to achieve those larger number of rounds besides the pricing and membership? Are you doing anything different next year than you did this year? Or are you just counting on better weather?
Well, I think we're going with that new golf now.
We have a different, web provider. So hopefully that helps people that are signing up online. Over the last probably 2 to 3 years, we've added additional leagues to fill slow times. We have a couples league that we added a couple years ago to kind of fill in the blanks when we're slow on Friday evenings. Throughout the summer, we added a match play league on Monday evenings, which was typically a slow time out at the golf course. What we need to try and figure out how to get people out Saturday and Sunday afternoons. It's busy throughout the morning and early afternoon, and then it's really slow until later on in the evening. That's been something that we've been trying to work through over the last number of years. For some reason, that's a tough time to get people to get up. So we have added these. We have added at least one event that they're on their 3rd annual this year. We added a basketball event here a couple of years ago, and they just hosted their 3rd annual event. So those are the kinds of events that we capture year in, year out, and then with the additional league play, we've kept the course busy throughout the week.
Any other questions? We're going to just approve this, Mike, with the other stuff?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Okay, there's no other questions for Wade. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And if you do have any other questions, don't be hesitate to email me or Wade or stuff. Okay. Mike, I assume you're taking the next one?
Yes. What you have in front of you is change order number 2 on the Prague Memorial Baseball Field Improvement Project that was awarded in 2017 with Ely Construction Company, Inc. We were finally able to, as we worked with Brian Jurdy with INS Group, is that he negotiated with Ely Construction that for additional inspection work that they had to do, because that project, which was supposed to have been completed in 2017, didn't get completed until this summer finally. So in his negotiations with them, he was able to solicit a $4,000 contract sum for additional time spent by INS. As part of that, he is not intending to bill the city for any additional inspection. That's his gift to the city. So you have a complete reduction of $4,000 off the contract with no additional pay or compensation to INS Group for their engineering services on this project.
Are we going to have the baseball committee come in once in a while, or?
I posted an email to them today, trying to see if we can't get them to come in at the next meeting, so that Patty can get closure on some of the remaining pieces on the project.
Okay.
So your action tonight is to approve change order number 2 in the amount of a $4,000 reduction with Ely Construction. As you can see on the back page, Brian is recommending it, and Ely Construction has signed it as well. We just got documents in the mail today that I think will enable Glenn to bring them forward at the next meeting to close the construction contract.
Okay, any questions?
I'll make a motion to approve change order number 2 regarding the Memorial Park baseball field improvements.
Second?
Yes. Motion by Dave Buzek, second by Kay Wilcox. Any other comments, questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay. Next thing, since it is just one meeting, I guess I'm going to make the recommendation that I will serve as the council appointee to the park board for the December meeting. So I guess I'll look for, that's my appointment. I'm looking for a motion to approve that.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion by Sean Ryan and second by Dave Brusick to appoint Chuck Nicolai as the council representative on the park board, and I'll be there bright and early on next Tuesday.
Evening.
Tuesday evening. Well, it could be early for me.
It's a long day.
Yeah. There's no other questions. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay. Consent agenda. Anyone have any questions? Anything on the consent agenda that you'd like to inquire on? If not, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Second by Sean Ryan. There's no other comments. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, we're at the miscellaneous, the fun part. Patrick, you still with us, buddy?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I have nothing.
All right, Mitch? Rick?
Yeah, I do. I would have tabled that for 30 days at least. I mean, the guy answered the one question from the lady. I wouldn't be hanging around there and stuff. But there's no plans in there for wheelchair accessibility, or stopping with a bus for a wheelchair, or just there's nothing in there for ADA. So only the corners. Yeah, you got ramps. Big deal. I mean that's not when if you park in a spot and you're trying to get a wheelchair out of the back seat or out of the trunk, you don't have time. You're going to be stuck there a little bit. I mean, his answer about just I wouldn't hang around, I thought it was quite condescending. I don't know. It would be nice to get a little more clarification on, well, who is saying it's got to be this way right now, So I don't know. if we could get a clarification on, are these plans really in concrete?
Well, I think the width of the road is the way I get it.
So if somebody gets hit there, whose liability is it?
Just like anything else, Rick, it's the liability of, if the driver is not in the lane, it would have to be investigated.
It would be hard for me, and if you would have tabled it for 30 days, I probably would have been voted no, and the rest of you guys would have voted yes, and then I would have had to go to the director of the DOT and everything, so it's probably good you guys are going to vote on it. But there is zero plans for any ADA or anything like that. I would say if you're going to close them, all them alleys off, fine, make them someplace where you can pull up a smart link and put a wheelchair in there or something, but everybody's shut off from that over there, so now you're going to shut the whole Main Street off to handicapped people.
I think everything is conforming to ADA.
There's a requirement to have a number of ADA spots on Main Street. A couple of them have been looked at. I wouldn't say they're set in stone that it's happening right here, but we do have to have, I believe it's 2 or 3 or more, but a minimum of 2 or 3 on the whole corridor.
So how do we get the clarification of where they are and stuff? I mean, they're going to be at like the end, like a bus stop would be?
Yes, yeah, it would be kind of at a bump out, it would be at that location. One spot that was talked about, and I would feel pretty safe in saying that it's probably going to end up there, is the closure that's happening in Wells Fargo, or the moving of their access. That's been talked about a number of times, that would be an ADA spot.
Well, if it's going to be floating around for another 2 weeks before the next, I would appreciate it if you guys, since I'm not up there to say it, let's get that a little more defined on how that is, and I don't know, go to his boss and say, that when one of our residents asks a question and he gets condescending, well, you better not hang around there, I don't know. So when I came into this meeting, I had already talked to Mike and thought, well, let's get it through, but those are valid questions on whether the Gestapo tactics of the DOT are acceptable. I mean, it's a New Prague city. The residents of New Prague get a right to have a little point of view, and a lot of people don't read the paper and come into the hearings and stuff like that. And so I don't know. You hear certain things, and I guess, yeah, 2 weeks from now, you got 2 weeks to really sit down and think, and is there a defined blueprint so that, is it totally unchangeable if you guys vote yes? The attorney there, if you could inquire, because you made it sound like there was an appeal process. Well, does that appeal process kaput if they vote yes? You know what I'm saying?
It does. That's what I was getting at. There are two options: either approve it or disapprove, and then go through a process that can appeal if there's appointments made to a board that looks at it and comes up with a determination. That's a different path than what we're talking about with the council taking or making a request to look at these, review, and then come back with explanations and more details.
See, so once they vote to proceed and approve, then any appeals process is kaput.
Correct.
Right.
But there's still...
So, even the amendment you wanted to make is gone. That's gone. If you guys vote yes in the next 2 weeks, that process is gone. There is no more appeals process left on the clock.
Well, my understanding is that they are going to look at it. I saw him take down the name and number of the one gentleman, and I'm just going to give them a couple weeks and wait till they come back with the
answer. And if the answer isn't acceptable, do you plan on voting no to it, or?
I don't want to delay the project. I'm going to have to get more information out.
it might not, because they said there was a certain amount of time.
Yeah, that could be. So
Well, there's a
We'd have to-
legal amount of time is 90 days.
90 days, and if we have to get, if there is an appeal process that goes in, and then once that appeal process is in, then you vote yes, but since the appeals process has already started, that stuff might be able to go while we're working, and it only takes to pull out our triple stakes. So I don't know, is that a possibility? And you know, you're the lawyer, but
Yeah, and again, I think we've taken, I don't want to say a hybrid process, but somewhat to say, MnDOT, look at this again, and city engineers look at this again and come back with more information. The council can still come to the point and say, we disapprove, now we'll go back formally and go through this with a review process with MnDOT. I don't know how much that's going to change it, but you got to see the information first to make that determination.
right. Well, you know, the way they're saying it is they're the decider, the ultimate decider.
Right.
Well, there's a process above them. I mean, they're not God.
No, they're not, but it is their project. We're doing it jointly, but it is a state highway that they're dealing with directly, and they do have that say on many of the aspects here.
Well, can you guys get in the next 2 weeks, get a clarification? Can you get a clarification on exactly where those handicap spots would be? And then at least get a map that IDs where the 11 that are getting closed off for the mayor, and then and we'll get appeals filed for the bowling alleys and whatever ones you also had, Sean. We'll get that process started, then you guys can vote on, and all that stuff will be in the works while you're in it, you know. But we already know that if you go to appeal this at this point, the appeal is virtually worthless, you know. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, if you appeal it, the timetable is done.
No, you could start the appeal process and still within that 90 days take the motion on, and if you approve to go, those appeal processes would already be filed. So they would be in the works. So you saying, yes, go ahead with the project doesn't stop those appeal processes from going on.
No, I think the appeal process is for the project.
Yeah, it's not.
Or
you
not
can't
for,
have,
not for an individual.
right,
No.
you can't have your cake and eat it too.
No.
Well, no, I mean, I'm
You
not
can't
asking.
say, I approve it, but I got an appeal, so really, I didn't approve it.
Well, no, I'm talking, that would be for an individual one, but
No.
But the individual doesn't lose their right to challenge any type of compensation necessary for a taking or something along those lines as to an access. But the reality is that's a very difficult road to go. I mean, it is. I mean,
once they say yes, it is. Yeah, so I know.
No, it has nothing to do with what the council makes a determination. It has to do with the actual reality. Is there reasonable access to the property? That's how the courts typically look at it.
So let's say that the guy that owns the auto lots over here, he says, well, I cannot work within these perimeters, you know. So now he doesn't get to use it as a car lot or a garage, you know.
Well, yeah, I don't know if they were aware that he was talking about having a garage there. And that was one thing that was my concern, that if they changed his, you know, if it was a gas station, they'd say he's got to have in and out. You know, that's what they looked at Clark Station there.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's kind of why I thought, you know, they should look at that. You know, the bowling alley, I know they've talked to Darren, and Darren said, yeah, we can live without it if you open our door. You know, I mean, if they met with people and people are fine with it, but, I mean, there's not much we can do about it.
Yeah, right.
They're dictating, you know, really, I mean, it is a state highway. I mean...
It's just that there's layers of engineers. I mean, you go, I work out of the DOT when I work at the Capitol, and there's literally one floor for this set of engineers, another floor for this set of engineers, and you got a couple architects over there, but the other parts for the engineers, it's just all the engineers and attorneys.
Right.
You can smell it when you walk up to it.
Hey, you know, the thing is, if there's 4 engineers in a room, that's almost as bad as 1 attorney.
All right, I'm done.
Okay. Thanks for your input. Jim?
I have nothing.
Bruce, you've been kind of quiet today.
I have nothing.
Okay. Glenn?
I've got nothing.
Ken?
Quick update on an email that Mike actually sent out to the council last Friday on 408 West Main Street, the depot. They had been in to get a consumption display permit from the council earlier this fall. And we just sent out an email that we'd been having difficulty getting basically compliance with some building code issues out on that property. And a couple of events were held in violation of not having a CO and a couple other things. So just had a meeting at 4 o'clock today with the building official and Police Chief Garais as well to meet with them. They're about an hour and a half for the meeting. I don't want to air all the details of that meeting, but in a nutshell, there seemed to be some miscommunication internally among the ownership group that had been occurring about information that had and hadn't been shared to the city as part of a permit process for that. They have a couple events coming up this weekend that they're very concerned about having occur. We noted they don't have a CO, certificate of occupancy for the building. They argued quite heavily that they didn't feel the building had changed from the former restaurant to the event space, but as we talked it through, I mean, they gutted the kitchen out of the building and basically opened it up a number of square feet, and it changed the occupancy, particularly basically made from square footage of the building overall, went from a B, a mercantile, up to an A3, and then when they asked for the alcohol to be brought in, that brought it down to an A2. There's kind of a cap on occupancy of 100 people and not have to sprinkler the building. In a nutshell, we left it with some action items for them. They need to get a architect code analysis to us by Wednesday of this week. The events they're planning to hold on Friday, Saturday were relatively small events. We may be able to come to an agreement to have them, those events happen. We would not have the alcohol, the consumption and display permit back from the state by that time. They indicated they might have one of the events catered by Pizzeria 201, who has a catering license to bring in alcohol if that would be the case, but they would have to have a staff person from the ownership group on site, potentially, if we can get that code analysis in to show that, truly those events would be small enough to not require the sprinklers, but ultimately looking to get the sprinkler systems installed and try to explain that we're not treating them any differently than the brewery. Checkers Bar was a situation where that building had been a bar. Nothing changed in the occupancy of that building. We've had same conversations about sprinklers with the theater and their potential for adding alcohol. So we're not treating them any differently, and that's really kind of the point we made. And I think there was a lot of miscommunication internally on their ownership team. They thought they had given us full plans and that things were just being delayed. We haven't received a plan that we can review yet at this point. We initially met with them on October 10th. On site to explain the sprinkler requirements and everything, and we're almost 2 months later, and I think the miscommunication among them was a lot to do with that. And then the other fact, I had talked to their realtor, Pat Sullivan, about that and other buildings, and I think one of the key things that is difficult when we talk to building owners, or in the case of this building owner, they bought it and never asked us about code requirements or anything, so they're kind of jumping into it blind. But even when we meet with people initially, if they don't have a clear vision of what they want to do with the building, we cannot design that building for them to determine if they need sprinklers or not and how they want to use this part of a building or not. So that's why we do meet as much as we can, and a lot of the cases like this one, they just didn't want to spend the money for an architect to determine what they could or couldn't do with that building. We can't design that for them. And ultimately, it looks like they probably will have to put sprinklers in the building. With the 2020 road project coming up, we talked to the State Fire Marshal's office, and we would be acceptable, and the state agrees with a fire department connection on the outside of the building where a fire truck could plug into that for, until the Main Street project is redone and a 6-inch water line is brought into the building. Not a 100% perfect situation, but it would get closer to compliance for the use of that building. And ultimately, if they sprinkler the building, occupant loads aren't a problem other than for how many bathrooms they have in there. So it was a good meeting, I think, overall. And we thought we had been very clear before. We had put everything in writing and had to talk it out face to face again and make it very clear that their events that they had were not okay. They had alcohol in that building and were over capacity with no sprinklers, unbeknownst to us. We found it after the fact. So.
Did the trigger for having to have sprinklers at the 100 occupancy?
For an A3 building, which is basically assembly with alcohol, that is the limit. 100 people.
So if they said our occupancy is all going to be 90, would it work or not?
No, we talked about it. You can't just say what your occupancy limit. Like they said, well, we're only going to rent to people that have groups of 98 or less. Well, we can't just take their word for it. It's based on square footage of the building and based on the classification of the building, how many people you can fit per square foot. So they had an attorney that was advising them on a few things incorrectly as well, we believe, based on our meeting today.
Yeah, those darn attorneys, cherry time.
Strike two.
We're working on it. We're trying to be, accommodating, but we can't vary from the building code. There's no variance process for that, and I think Scott can attest to that as well. We can vary from our zoning ordinances, but building code, there is no ability to do that.
Ken, do they have a renter upstairs?
There are 2 apartment units upstairs, and I think one of the 2 is occupied at this point.
So does that also have based on that, do they need a sprinkler system?
A couple of different things they could do there. They could provide, there's a 1-hour separation between the lower floor and the upper floor, which was fine with the certain types of building use. They either have to add another hour of protection to get a 2-hour separation from the apartments to that assembly use, or sprinkler the second level.
Okay.
So it's kind of up to them, and that's what we laid it out. Maybe it's cheaper to sprinkler because they talked about just putting another layer of fire protection on the floor up there because the flooring is bad to begin with, and it may very well be cheaper to drop a sprinkler head or 2 in each unit. But we can't determine that. That's what they need to do.
Okay. Did you talk to Pat Sullivan today?
I talked to Pat Sullivan on Thursday last week to kind of explain. He was unaware of a lot of the background. He had been led to believe that even before they bought the building that they had worked this all out with us. We never had gotten a phone call till well after that. So I think he understood a little bit our position better after that they just hadn't checked and they closed on the building and started doing work, and I don't think had any intentions of getting a building permit, despite everybody needs a building permit when they change occupancy or moves into a building. Sometimes it's a $50 permit if you're, we need to check out fire exits and things like that. And in this case, it was a lot bigger change where they had tore out a kitchen and opened up the square footage, by a number of hundreds of square feet.
Okay. But that was on Thursday.
I talked to Pat Sullivan last Thursday.
Okay, but not since the meeting.
Not since the meeting. No, I literally came from the meeting right here.
Okay. Well, he had reached out to me, and I didn't have all the facts. All I had seen was Mike's email on Friday. I was going to wait till tonight to the miscellaneous part to get an update that you just gave us. But
yep.
Therein lies part of the issue, as Ken just alluded to, is that you have residential real estate individuals that are not knowledgeable with building code requirements and that, and that's part of what's involved in this one.
We try to work with we get that, local folks that want to start businesses and things don't have $100,000 just to blow on these things, so we try to work with them on that. But if they don't have a clear idea and put a little bit of money into it from an architectural standpoint, which is required on a commercial building. We can't give them straight answers. We kind of dealt with that with the brewery a bit too, which I think in the end, they did sprinkler that rather than put up a fire divider wall in the middle of that building, and that ultimately let them add their event room with absolutely no issue in the end, so. Code is kind of pushing towards sprinkler for commercial, just the way it's going.
So you didn't fine him or anything?
We did not.
You're such a nice guy, Kim.
We don't, I'm not saying that couldn't happen if they go and hold more events without permission, but we did not at this point.
Okay, anything else?
Nope.
Mike?
Thursday night, there's a charter commission meeting at 6 o'clock, and you probably saw in your packet, as was noted on the agenda, that because we have 3 of you that are technically members of the charter commission, Scott has suggested that I notice that meeting as a special council meeting because 3 of you constitute a majority of the council. And so there's no necessarily action or separate agenda as members of the city council other than to attend and to partake under the charter commission agenda. And you will see that that will come again the following week when we have the EDA board meeting on the 12th, that will also have 3 of you that are on the EDA board, which will constitute a quorum of the council in attendance at that. So that's why I'm having to separately notice that as a special meeting. And we'll have to account for who is or isn't in attendance, and really the only action is to partake in the agendas associated with the other board or committee meeting that you are at, but it's requiring me to notice that. Haven't had this, it came to discussion last year at the last charter commission meeting because we were just heading into that, I believe, with we had 3 of the council members that were on, and I raised the issue with Scott, and he said the safest position is to post notice of that. So
Does one of you guys say I'm not coming?
No, you can't.
it doesn't matter whether somebody's going to attend or not. It's that they are specifically members of that board or commission. And so attending is irrelevant. That with those 3 members constituted of that means that there's a majority of the governing board that could be in attendance. And so I have to notice that up front. So we're taking the most safest precautionary route so that nobody files a violation of the open meeting law notice against us.
Okay.
Other than that, as I've informed you, and I'll have more details yet to come, is that I will be out on a medical leave beginning next week for a period of weeks. I don't know exactly all of that, but I'll have more information forward to you, and would only ask and appreciate your consideration of that under the HIPAA laws.
Okay. I'll let you know when Mike should be able to come back. My wife's going through it 2 weeks ahead, so.
I'm sorry that with my explanation, I had Barb bring those to the meeting, that I figured you had enough to read in your packets this weekend, so this is the formal notice.
Christmas green? Okay. Anything else?
Nope.
Scott?
No,
It's nice seeing you again, sir.
it's been a while.
Yes,
I guess that's a good thing, though.
this is true.
Yeah.
This is true. Barb, you have anything?
No, I don't.
Sean?
No.
David? No. Bruce?
Just to thank staff and all departments for the budget process. Me coming in the very end, very helpful, and it's obvious that A lot of people put a lot of work into it, so I appreciate that. Thought it went very well. I attended the holiday lights, and there's a lot of people downtown, so appreciate the police and their support of the community activities. It's important to, for the fabric of the community, have these kind of things, and it's great that the police supports it and seemed to go very well. I just had a general question I didn't pose at the hearing, but on the Main Street project, the general levy amount and the state aid, I don't know if there's a quick answer. Where is that money projected to be? Is that bonding that's going to occur for that? For the Main Street, the city
Project
portion?
We're going to be bonding.
In 2020, we would likely get to that as part of it. Yeah, we'll have to bond for the whole entire project because we're going to have to front-end MnDOT's piece. We've got significant, the grant, 1.75 million will be coming into there. We'll have county monies coming into that. But for all of the utilities and the special assessments and that, we'll have to bond for all of that.
So the city's portion is $675,000. The amount of the bond payment, is that, if we estimated that in our future budgets, we'll have to increase the levy to cover that then? Is that correct?
Yes, in all likelihood, we're reaching a point here in 2020-21 where we're expecting to see a fairly significant increase on our debt picture. Haven't had time to sit down and kind of show you and walk through that. But on the 2020 project, not certain whether we'll actually have to have any part of a tax levy or whether alternatively we'll use state aid for that piece. We haven't determined all of those final facets of it.
We can, it just occurred to me that we're looking at a significant increase in levying in the next few years.
But we also have a significant amount coming off.
Okay, thank you.
Is it 21 or 22? No, Patty's sleeping already. It's like 22 or 23 or something. It's dropping.
No, I think it's 21.
Is it 21? Yeah, it's a significant drop, so yeah.
Well, Mr. Mayor, you always have the right answers.
They just call me Cliff Clavin. I just make them up if they're not right.
That's all I had, thank you.
Okay. Kay?
I have nothing.
I have nothing, so we'll see everyone in a couple weeks. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Sean Ryan. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Okay. Thank you, everyone, for the long